I believe a good coach's job is to become obsolete. We should be able to teach a client so well that they should be able to do a lot of these things even if they weren't working with us. But you learn very quickly that any idiot can get somebody tired. It takes a skilled coach to get somebody better.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Jack Lovett, it's great to have you on the podcast. It was fun going back and doing all the research on you, to kind of gather what we were going to speak about. And one thing I want to start with, because it just cracked me up, so we have to. So click on that first link that you have up there.
Triceps death.
From 17 years ago.
Yes.
Yes. And so it's this, the tricep death.
Is this going to bring back some PTSD for Jack?
Yeah. So I believe it's 3 or 5 reps. It's on a 1 board. Then you go to a 2 board. And then the 3 board. Is it 5 or 3? I'm not
Looks like a 3.
Should be the 4 board now.
Oh, 4.
I still remember it well.
How many reps?
I'm not surprised
3.
looking at this.
I should know this because 4, there's backstory. 5, there you go, the 4.
I'm pretty sure the aim was to get to 20, and I'm pretty sure I fell short.
Yeah.
Now, in all fairness, I do have mitigating circumstances, which of course I will get out.
Well, this was 17 years ago, right? All right, go ahead and turn this one off. On a whim, I decided to actually do this stupid shit, which I believe I don't want to take credit for being the first for anything, because I'm sure somebody else did. I may have been the first, but I just posted this, the tricep death thing. I don't know why, just for some stupid reason. I'm sitting in my office and I'm thinking, oh shit, I came up with the idea and let's go film this. So I went all the way up, then I say fuck it and go all the way back down. So my question would be, why was that did Joe just put that in your program? Or did he see this and was one of the idiots that was like, because I did this, I'm going to replicate it? Because it's got no real application whatsoever. It's not going to help anything. Do you remember why you did it?
Absolutely. But first off, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be out here. So I'm immensely grateful. So thank you very much for having me on.
Yes.
Now back to DeFranco. I'm pretty sure he simply set up, we were there as a mentorship. We would learn during the course of the day, watch him working with the athlete groups, spend some one-on-one time with him. And then at the end of the day, he would put us through a workout. So on one day, it was a max effort upper body day. It was a lower body, etc. We were there for a few days. And I'm pretty sure that he was wanting to just push us to the very limits. He wanted records on the board. The guy that was spotting me, Paul Valancourt, I believe he took the trap deadlift record that day at DeFranco's. So basically, I think it was a little bit of an initiation for us. I'd like to, I want to credit Joe. There must have been some logic that I wasn't privy to at the time.
I don't think so with this. I think it was just literally me thinking this would be something fun to film.
Yeah.
But then after posting it, like this has no application really for anybody for any reason.
Now, don't make correct me if I'm wrong.
Fortitude.
Well, surely
for that.
But I'm pretty sure it featured in his programs to some degree at the time. A lot of the athletes, Mike Wadango, Brian Cushing, they were there at the time. I'm pretty sure it did feature it to some degree in their programs.
Yeah. You can turn this off because it's depressing the shit out of me because I can't bench that for a single right now.
Just tell yourself there's like 3 slingshots under the feet to make yourself feel better.
Something else I found is you wrote an article for us in 2012. And just to let people know, you formed, I believe, the first warehouse gym in the UK.
That's correct.
Strongman athlete, coach of thousands of people. You work with everybody across the spectrum. So this was what you learned from Strongman. And what I want to know is, as I go through these items, how many of these things are still the same? Right? So you got no idea what's on this, right?
No, because it was a long time ago.
Interesting. Lift under the best and listen.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Get smarter, which makes me really wonder what the difference between that and the first one is. But get smarter is the second one. So I'm going to assume, I didn't read it. I'm going to assume it's just education.
Absolutely. Your knife can never be too sharp. And I stand by that to this day.
Learn to adapt and hack.
Agree.
Never give up.
1000%.
That's the 5 that you have in there.
An inspired list.
Yes. Well, it's going to be more now because we will discuss, what the more is from that. So going back, how were you first introduced into just strength and conditioning?
So for me, it would have been, I was lucky enough to be able to compete to a pretty high level in sport within the UK, whether that was national level rugby. I rode competitively internationally. So there was a decent exposure to a sport for what was available to me. So you get a degree of an exposure to a gym environment, albeit very limited, but that's going to spark that passion. That's going to ignite that interest. But then again, in the UK, probably so now, but especially back then, you're then left to your own devices. So it's something that you've got to read the muscle magazines, the muscle and fitness, the flex magazines. That's pretty much all that's available to you. But
well, with that, because it's more strength and conditioning that you're looking for, and that's very limited in those resources back
100%.
then.
But if you'd spoke to me then, I wouldn't have even known what strength and conditioning was. It was just gym training that we were doing.
Yeah.
But then somebody, a gentleman called Colin Fox, important to get his name out there, loaned me a book, Charles Poliquin's Book of Methods. And he also mentioned a website called T Nation, I believe. So then that put me onto that. Chad Waterbury's anti-bodybuilding hypertrophy program. That then exposed me to a completely different world. That's where I came across Joe DeFranco. That's where I came across yourself, elitefts, Westside. Then the concept, it wasn't just training in a gym, it was strength and conditioning. So then that inspires you. That just looks so interesting, so fascinating. So then you start to absorb all of that information. Now, obviously, back then it was VHS tapes if you could get it.
Yeah.
Obviously, T Nation on the internet, and you just develop it from there. So that's where that interest came from, and then apply it to yourself, which is what I did. Because again, in the UK, you're a little bit younger than me, aren't you, Tom?
A little bit.
Yeah. So back then, that wasn't a career that you would be pursuing in the United Kingdom. I wanted to be a strength and conditioning specialist. If we said that at school, the school I went to, you were either going to become a doctor or a lawyer. That was it. It was impossible to conceive of any other occupation. So obviously you just keep looking into that. And I have to credit T Nation. It was a T-Mag back then. The boards on elitefts, where different people, Jim Wendell were writing as well. So that's what exposed it to me. That's what inspired me for that. And then once I made the decision where I'm going to take a risk, I left the career that I was following at the time.
What was that?
I was in the prison service. I was a defense instructor. And that's where I started getting my first weightlifting qualifications. You go through British weightlifting.
Yeah.
You start teaching the staff there, but then you can also start coaching the inmates. So I was lucky enough to, go around the UK teaching that. And you've got that passion. You love instructing. You know that
you're teaching the inmates defense.
That's very true.
All right, there's some shit that's way different than what we have here.
Especially in the youth prisons. So I was lucky enough to work with adults, but also in youth prisons as well. If they're just locked up with nothing to occupy themselves, especially like the male population, trouble is not too far away.
Yeah, but you can't teach them fucking algebra? I mean, you're going to teach them how to fight? That seems a little...
Well, they had education, although I'm pretty convinced algebra wasn't there.
Yeah.
Generally, from like the physical output, they had a sports hall there.
Yeah.
They had a basic weightlifting kit, and that's what sort of let me dip my toe into it. The discipline. We're going to train at the gym later on in the day. I expect good performance, good behavior and education, good performance when you get back to what they call house blocks, the wings, etc. I thought it was immensely cathartic for them. Now, obviously, we're not introducing a elite strength and conditioning program to have warriors ready to go to battle or anything, but I thought it was an immensely useful tool, especially for a coach. How do you learn to communicate to that population?
Now, before that, with the training that you were doing, did you see correspondence in your own competitive activities?
In terms of once I followed strength and conditioning, that absolutely. And I was lucky. I feel I was lucky genetically. Strength kind of came naturally to me. I was put to work very young, so I started working on farms from like 13 years old, building sites. So I had very like manual labor jobs. I responded very well to that. But once we were 14, 15 years old, that's when they initiated power clean, bench press into the training. I responded very well from that. And that, again, probably the same for yourselves. It becomes intoxicating, doesn't it? If you can put some effort into something and you can see a reward, it's why I love strength training so much in all of its facets, because it doesn't discriminate. If you put the effort in, you can get a positive reward from that. And especially from like an adolescent Jack, that was fantastic.
What kind of response did you see in the inmate population when they started to go down that journey? Like you have them apply some discipline and put effort into X, and then they get better. Like, did you see any quite like radical changes in like attitude and behavior from them as they went through that program? Because like, imagine for some of them, that might be the first time where someone has taken them and said like, you can get better at something. You just got to put the correct effort in. And they maybe never had that.
I think I'll be cautious to use the term radical.
Sure.
That being said, especially, and unfortunately so, that male population in the prisons, the adolescents, the 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, quite likely didn't have a positive male role model in their lives to that point. Having a male show an interest in them, speak to them as equals, so it wasn't like a drill sergeant type of thing. Of course, you must maintain discipline, but there's many ways to go around that without being, particularly confrontational. Teach them if they were to be consistent. Teach them if they put a significant amount of effort into something that they can improve. And for some of them, that might have been the only sense of achievement that they might have had, especially when they were, incarcerated. Yeah, absolutely. But I would be cautious to say,
yeah, sure. I understand. But also for you as a coach, that's a tough first crowd to deal with, as opposed to I'm a PT on a gym floor, someone's paid me to hire me because they want me to coach them. This is Jack being put in front of a crowd who maybe are being made to be there or don't really want to be there. And that's your first audience. Like,
well, they weren't given a choice. It was by going to the gym. But then I have to credit the prison service that I got a job in the prison service, but I became a national instructor. Basically, if you joined, you needed to learn how to defend yourself. So the national instructors would teach you that. So I went onto that course probably within the first 2 weeks. You go down to the National Training Centre, and that's a pretty intensive 2-3 week period where all day, every day, you were learning the techniques, and then you have to teach to instructors 15, 20, 30-minute demonstrations. So you're basically thrown in at the deep end, which for me was either sink or swim, and I would like to think I responded reasonably well to that. So all elements of my ability to coach stem from there, to speak to an audience that you've never met before. And I was probably one of the youngest there at the time as well. You typically have like older adults that are going down that vocation. So of course, then taking that into the weightlifting side of things, again, it was, Lovett, you're going to take these to the gym. You're a big guy, you must lift weights. Go teach them. But in some situations, I do like that sink or swim. You have to step up and perform, or not, as the case may be.
Yeah.
And I credit with definitely developing some of the skills that I have as a coach.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
When did the strongman come into the equation?
1995, Christmas, which is typically when World's Strongest Man is shown on television. And I saw a guy called Manfred Herbal. I don't know if you can remember him. I think he came from the same hometown as Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm pretty sure he's from the same hometown in Austria. And at the time, he had like 23 or 24-inch biceps, so he looked like Hercules. So 9-year-old Jack, you see that on television, that just looked fucking amazing. There was a Welshman, Gary Taylor. So he's won World's Strongest Man. I'm sure he's competed at the Olympics in weightlifting, powerlifting, like a tremendous all-round strength athlete. Amazing physiques. You see them doing those, what I would consider to be inspiring things, what I constitute manly endeavors, flipping tires, stones. So as soon as I saw that, your imagination is captivated. Now, granted, you don't think, well, there's a career in that. That's what I would like to compete in. But it leaves an indelible impression on you, or at least it did for myself. So that love, that passion was there all the time. And then, obviously, you get a little bit older, you get into training. The gym that I trained at the time, which I'd have been like 16, 17, the owner was heavily involved in Britain's Strongest Man. So a few of the guys that would compete there, they were up against Glenn Ross. So they were, at the time, high-level national competitors. So they were training amongst us. After coming across T-Mag and Charles Poliquin, I found Dinosaur Training by Brooks Kubik, which is quite possibly maybe still my favourite book to this day. So that style of training, again, appealed to me. Then you see the strongmen training for those events. That kind of gets you excited. But at the same time, they seem to be all the way up here, much larger, much stronger. Probably something that I couldn't do in terms of competitively. But the training, it was a lot more exciting to lift a log to me than, no disrespect to this fine establishment, than lie on a bench and do a bench press. So that's where that inspiration came from. And again, why am I crediting T Nation with everything at the moment? On the forums there, I came across Britain's natural strongest man. And at the time, my views have changed over the years in terms of enhanced and not enhanced. But that was a route that was of no interest to me. Partly to do with the gym culture at the time where we were. That just wasn't the culture that I was particularly interested in. But then I saw a competition, Britain's natural strongest man. Why not give it a try and go from there? So then I didn't have any aspirations. I just opened the gym. I thought it was a great way. I'd recently bought 531 from elitefts there. I had a group of guys that were like under my wing, so to speak. Let's try this system. Let's see how it like helps us get stronger. There's a competition in 12 weeks' time. Why not we prepare for it? And then luckily or unluckily, depends on the way you look at it, then I won it the first time. So I won the British title the first time I did it. So your first competition, you become the champion of a particular competition. And
How many were in it?
Probably 30, 40. So it was a good number.
Yeah.
And it's important that I say this because over the years I've been misquoted. Yes, I won the title of Britain's natural strongest man. I don't profess to be the strongest man in Britain, because some people that would compete in the other Britain's strongest man would see that as a slight, as an insult. I don't. It was just a competition that I chose to compete in. But ultimately, then that puts you into a position who doesn't enjoy winning. And that's when I really pushed on with it. Yeah.
So at what point did that bring you to the States?
So the States was actually around about the same time. It was almost like the perfect storm. I was disillusioned in my career within the prison service. I wasted university, did a course. Do you even know what I did at university, Tom?
I don't, but I mean, I can't judge on courses that we don't use anymore, really. So,
so I did ancient history, Latin, and Greek. So that was
all the easy ones.
Yes,
yeah.
My incredibly useful. In all fairness, I enjoyed it, but it was leading to no. I didn't want to become a teacher. I didn't want to become a lecturer or anything like that. So I ended up drifting into the career in the prison service. And whilst I enjoyed it being a coach, there was no passion there. I couldn't see this as the way forward. But then, looking at what was going on in the States, coming across Joe DeFranco, reading about his facility, Eric Cressy, the earlier works of Thibodeau, that I just aspired to that. And then I had the opportunity to leave the prison service and manage a gym. And that might seem like career suicide. My mother certainly thought it was at the time, that's for certain. Because again, in the UK, the prison service, you got a good pension. It is like a good job if you wanted to keep it for a career. But that was just not for me. That was not my life. I thought there was more there to be had. So I took the leap, basically left the prison service, went all in managing this gym. That kind of got my bit between the teeth. But it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was a ladies-only gym on a high street that was turned into, well, I basically went in there like a bull in a china shop, turned into what I had seen to some degree. But at that time, you look again to the US, because I had to qualify myself. My degree didn't qualify me for this industry. So again, I'm looking, what's the one qualification that, Joe DeFranco, Waterbury, Eric Cressy, they all had in common at the very least, and it was the CSCS. And at the time, you couldn't take the CSCS in the UK, so you had to go to America. So I'm pursuing my qualifications that way. And then looking across, I saw the warehouse that Joe had, which I believe we were speaking yesterday. It was his second facility. He had recently outfitted that. And that just looked amazing. And I think he was putting out great material at the time. So his West Side for Skinny Bastards program came out. There's somebody who is employing the methods that I've been inspired by through Charles Poliquin, through dinosaur training, but working with elite athletes, collegiate athletes into the NFL. This is just fucking fantastic. How do I become that? So obviously you try and correspond via email at the time. Luck would have it, Joe decided to announce his first and only ever mentorship. So I was managing this gym, aspiring to something like that, had the opportunity to do the mentorship with Joe, saw the strongman post for the British strongman competition. This was all within about a month of each other. And it all kind of came together perfectly from that regard. I flew across, mentored with Joe. Probably during that period of time, when I saw the warehouse facility, I saw how it was set up, I saw the elite racks. That's not what I was working in England. What is it? Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
They didn't, basically selfishly, the type of facility that I aspired to, the one that I'd been exposed to when I was over in New Jersey with Joe, that didn't exist in the United Kingdom. So fuck it, I'll build one.
So how were you paying the bills when you were here with Joe?
Oh. Yeah, that was a tough one. Well, for one, I was so fucking broke. My grandfather actually paid for my flight over. And I didn't even bring a coat. I didn't own a coat, like a winter jacket. I didn't factor in how cold New Jersey is in January. So when we landed, I'm pretty sure, this is no joke, we were about 3 or 4 planes behind Sully landing on the Hudson. So it was very fresh in my mind, and I'm not the best flyer at the best of times. But either way, when I got there, it was so cold, couldn't afford a coat or anything. The motel we were staying at, I would just feed up on the breakfast buffet, and that would see me all the way through the day, which is why I struggled on tricep death. I was fucking starving to death.
I like how
by
you
the end
sort
of
of
the
go
day.
back to that.
But basically, from a build perspective, I was lucky enough I had my own home, but I made the decision. I spoke with my mother. I'm very close with her. I'm going to go all in. I have to make this happen. I will sacrifice whatever is needed. So whether that's, a car, I didn't have a car, furnishings in the home. I know it sounds pretty mundane, but basically, I'm not going to go out, not socialize, but this is what I want. I will find a way to make it work. My credit rating was abysmal because the first thought was, I'll just claim some of my mortgage back. And that's where I'll get the money. And we'll start it like that. I mean, I was so naive. The business plan that I had basically didn't exist. But my credit rating was so bad that I couldn't even do that. So I was lucky enough to scrimp around a little bit of money that made it happen. And then it becomes a sink or swim situation yet again. Especially when the facility first opened, you got a warehouse that might be the same over here. We had 3 months rent free from the landlord. Then we had 3 months at 50% rent. So basically after 6 months, I knew I was going up to full rent, full business rates, make it happen.
How did you put the equipment in there?
So there's a company in the United Kingdom called Watson Gym Equipment. Nobody made the equipment that I wanted. And getting equipment, well, actually, the first piece of kit I ever bought myself were blast straps from elitefts. I want to say 2004, 2005. I separated my shoulder in rugby, reached out to Eric Cressy. He was good enough to suggest blast straps from elitefts. You should have seen the looks in the traditional British bodybuilding gym when I attached the blast straps to the Smith machine. They were looking at me like I'd lost my fucking mind. But either way, when it came to the equipment, nobody built it. I couldn't respectfully afford to bring any equipment in from the US. I reached out to a few manufacturing companies in the UK and said, you don't make what I need. I know who makes what I need. There's a company called Watson Gym Equipment. They flew me down to Bristol, and I spent the entire day, basically, this is the collegiate rack that was at Joe DeFranco's. This is how I would like it. 45 raise, glute ham raise, went down that route. Came up with a list of equipment, what I thought at the time was the bare minimum that I would need. In hindsight, I started with too much equipment. And the bill was, if I rightly recall, £23,000, £25,000. And the owner, which is why I mentioned the company, Simon Watson, was very, very good. He basically allowed me to pay it off in 3 installments, interest-free, over, coincidentally, that same 6-month period. So the minimal cash that I'd scrimped around, my family had supported me with, that paid the deposit. And basically I knew the rent, the rates, the equipment. I had 6 months to get it paid off and make it happen.
I want to talk about sodium for a second. The research shows that optimum sodium levels are about 2 to 3 times higher than the recommended levels. That's where Element comes in. For the past 2 years, I have used Element packs in a multitude of different ways. Each stick has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. There's no sugars, there's no fillers, it's just what your body needs. And it's used by the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team, Navy SEALs, professional sports teams. You'll hear how many people swear by how much Element has made a difference in their ability to not crash, to fight fatigue and cramps, to maintain optimal fluid balance, improve mental focus, help regulate stress and support deeper sleep. They also just dropped the 12-ounce sparkling can, which is great. It's got 500 milligrams of sodium. Head over to drinkelement.com/table talk and you'll receive a free 8-count sample pack with every order. I've never heard anybody have a bad experience, but if you do, they'll make it right immediately, no questions asked.
And there's no greater motivator than necessity.
Yeah, sure. I just want to backtrack 1 minute if you don't mind. Obviously, there's a bit of a trend here of like sink or swim scenarios where you kind of had to step up to the plate.
Different words,
no, it's good. It's good. Well, obviously the Joe DeFranco mentoring was like a a huge risk for you. So I'm just curious, like, what did you glean from that? Because, you talk extremely positive of it, which, we would all expect. But considering it was such a huge investment and risk for you, what did you come back with that makes you look at it and go, I would do that 100% again? What were the big takeaways?
Two main ones. First off, and we touched on this a little bit last night at dinner, how he trapped me when I came through the door that very first morning. And I'll admit there was a little bit of apprehension. I was flying solo, very much out of my comfort zone, sat outside of a warehouse in New Jersey, watching all of these NFL athletes go in there and thinking, am I in the right place here? I count massively how people treat people, first impressions. He was very welcoming, very supportive, delighted that I'd made the trip over. So that instantly, it breaks the ice, but it makes you more comfortable. I'm in the right place. I'm learning from the right individual. Now, in my opinion, it costs nothing to be nice. And that's the bare minimum you should do. But it's, again, my experience, whilst I was over in New Jersey, I thought I would capitalize on it. I'll reach out to other known strength and conditioning coaches within the area. They were less well receptive as Joe was. So again, he was incredibly welcoming to me. And then I saw his work ethic from coming through the door. And I'm stealing his words. He said he wasn't the smartest coach, but he was willing to outwork his competition. So he would do whatever it took. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. At that time, I believe he had coaches working with him up to that point. And then very recently, they had left. So all of the coaches that were working with him, they had opened up a gym hundreds of yards away, basically, and they'd taken a lot of the client base. I don't understand the dynamic. He was very open about that, but basically they had undercut his prices. They'd taken a lot of the client base. And I still remember this vividly. He said, do you know how I'm going to combat that? He said, I'm going to write even more things for Elite FTS. This is honest truth. I'm going to make sure that I'm contributing to the likes of T-Nation, Elite FTS, to get my name out there, to keep it out there, helping people through the free Q&A that he did at the time, and I will outwork my competition. Now, that resonates well with me. So I don't think anybody should be claiming to be the smartest person in the room, but I'm far from the smartest person in the room. So here's me coming to this vocation later in life, in my 20s. Yes, I can learn these skills. And yes, if I put the work in, there's rewards to be had. So they were the two most important things that I took from it. And then, to be honest, there was an awful lot. He gave me a very good piece of business advice that you actually gave him, which was he was debating moving facility when I was there. So he was in his second, going to the third. He said he'd spoke to Dave Tate. And what you'd apparently said to him was, are you booked out every hour of every day? So if you're open 15 hours a day, do you have clients every single hour, or are there gaps? Because if you're not busting at the seams on every one of those hours, then you don't need a large facility. And from what I infer from that is you don't need to have larger rent, larger rates, large utilities. And that stuck with me then, again, because I'm thinking I'm starting in a tiny place. This is nothing like this. So again, there's hope for me. But almost 20 years later, that's a very sage piece of advice. And it's advice that I do give every sort of coach that I work with now, or aspiring gym owner. Because it seems to be a plague in the UK.
God, his first place was like a 10 by 10 room.
I've seen it in VHS tapes, but I've never actually visited in person.
Yes. So it's that was the biggest mistake I was seeing with people back then, was jumping to the next step before they had to. It's like, and back then the commercial space was available everywhere. It's like, if you don't go now, there's still going to be a place in a year or two.
Yeah.
But unless you have a waiting list, this makes no sense.
Yes.
It just doesn't make sense. But you're combating the dream that they want. They want to go here. I'm like, well, that dream will be crushed if you go there and you triple your expenses, but you're not able to bring up your client.
Yes.
You're enjoy the dream for a couple months, then you're going to tank. You have everything that you need. And then the other thing with him, with that third one, was if you're going to do it the best that you possibly can. Don't just move it, make it so it's going to work in video, make sure it's going to work in photos, make sure it's going to brand wherever you put your content.
Yes.
Just don't move the same shit into a bigger space and then not have any branding associated. And he was contributing a lot, it's all over the internet, plus his videos and all this other stuff. All that was branding. Forget about the revenue that it's generating, because that's not going to be permanent. It's going to be, you're not going to sell he's not selling VHS tapes now,
Yeah.
right? So they're not going to sell forever, but they're going to brand you, and that brand can lead to certification, all the other kind of stuff that kind of goes with that. But you're in a different spot though, because here in the US at that time, he wasn't the first warehouse gym, right? But he's probably the first well-known or one of the first well-knowns, but they were kind of in every big city.
Yeah.
The sports, especially the sport training stuff on the SAQ side was definitely, all over the place in random orders. You don't have any of that over there.
No.
Right. So you're going over there and you're trying to lay down a foundation of this type of gym when it's not been done before.
Yeah.
Right. So you can take some of the principles and they should work, but you're in a whole different demographic because now you have to convince people that this is the place to go compared to all their other options. And they're ignorant because outside of the people that may be following other people in the States, which is going to be small,
Yes.
You're in a different battle. So how did you go about that?
Education. So well, first and foremost, I had drank the Kool-Aid. I was fully behind the type of place that Joe had set up, the training methodology behind it. That was the way forward, in my opinion, to get better results for people. Like the ethos at Spartan, my gym, is results-based strength training, as in strength doesn't discriminate. It can help everybody improve. Obviously, you have to deliver it in different ways. So I was fully committed to that. That was the way forward. So because I believed in it, it's like to my very core, I was so passionate about it. If I could work with somebody in person, that enthusiasm could become hopefully infectious. That passion could inspire them just a little bit. But again, they have to get through the door. So where do you go from there? And that's something else that I took from Joe. Hustle. Reach out. Nobody is psychic. We're in a warehouse, which is typically tucked away. So there's no foot traffic. That's the one downfall of having a warehouse. Nobody's walking past the front door going, hey, this looks awesome, I'm going to join. Which tradition in the UK, gyms were high street based, so you would get footfall from there. So that's fine. I'll reach out to any local community group. There was a local rugby club. Great. I'll come and do pre-season with you. I'll do pre-season for free. Give as much of my time away as possible for free. At the time, I reached out to all of the magazines, the Men's Fitness, the Men's Health. Can I contribute? Can I write? Some didn't respond. Some did positively. Very small sort of snippets. You grow from there. The local media. It's basically about education, giving a lot away for free. The first qualification I ever got was a kettlebell certification. So we brought kettlebells into our gym. People were, again, looking, what the fuck is a kettlebell? TRX, I remember going to do a TRX certification, suspension straps. Again, you bring in those things in there, get people to come in for free. And that was basically overkill. From that way, it just doubled down. You have to give a lot of your time away for free, be willing to educate. And I was convinced that the results would do the talking for themselves. If I did a good enough job, people would have such an experience. And again, if they get results, when they're going to tell a friend, and that was I doubled down on that. And I'm very grateful that I did because it didn't fail me. Obviously, you have to deliver the goods, but then I was quite confident in my abilities as well.
The kettlebell thing just cracked me up because I'm thinking like, what kind of bullshit kettlebell propaganda was this? Because we're told over here, when it started to really have that big influx, kettlebells are huge overseas in the UK and Russia and so forth. I think you're over there and they're like, people are like, kettlebells, like, what the fuck? I'm like, Pavel, what kind of propaganda bullshit was being pulled? It wasn't popular anywhere.
It certainly wasn't popular at the time there. Again, for that method, of training. Yeah. The typical, I keep looking at you, Tom, obviously from the UK, it was bums and tums classes. Yeah. I remember the gym that we took over when I went to manage there, it was recumbent cycles with television screens on. It was closed for 2 weeks. When it reopened, I'd put in dumbbells, a very basic power rack. Yeah. They came in, they were like, where's the treadmills? Where's the bikes with the TV screens with all the magazines on? That was very much a gym in the United Kingdom. You would have a hardcore bodybuilding, Dorian Yates, the Temple. That was probably closing down about that period of time, but they still existed. Then there was like the ladies' gym, and then you had a leisure centre, a sports centre, and that was it. So the pickings were slim. So again, when you bring it out there, people had never seen anything. But again, how do you combat that? Well, I'll put out free classes, free courses. Come in, we will teach you how to use these. You will feel the difference. And then I started to pick up my first clients as well. And obviously you get results from them and it just builds from there.
Well, that leads to this dicey situation, which I'm wondering how you manage, because that's how you get it out. But once you start getting clients in, you can't do that because now you're training the clients.
Yes.
Right. So your outreach goes to zero because of the clients you have. You have to rely on the referrals or, 20-hour work days, which is typically where everybody kind of falls with that, because it still has to be done because you get what I'm saying? Because it's everybody, I don't know if that still exists today, with the training centers that are out there, because they can use social media and so forth to be able to help push all that out. But you didn't have that.
No.
So the only way you could really do it is you had to go someplace.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to have to go someplace and that's going to take 3-4 hours of your time, you have to trade that time for actually training people for 3 to 4 hours or add it.
Yeah, exactly. And from my end, did I do it the smartest way? Possibly not. But it was simple. I will outwork my competition. I will work the hours that are required. Now, granted, when I first started taking clients on, I've often made this quip before, when I started with too much equipment, I had twice as many 45 raises as I did clients when I opened the gym. And I had 2 45 raises, actually paying clients per se. But that's fine. I will coach the paying clients. And then in my free time, I'll invite the local schools down and they can come and train during the lunch period. And if the weekend or Saturday, it makes no difference. I prided myself, at least the first 3-4 years, as you well know, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. I had a horrendous, at the time I didn't notice it. It feels like a blur. I thrived on it. I'm not saying this in terms of it's admirable or people should do that. I think you should focus on working smarter, not necessarily harder. But for me, I just simply doubled down. I will put the work in. And obviously, as your client base builds, then you do less for free. But it's important to always keep that element in. Like from my end, I think education is so important, especially where I come from, trying to engage the youth. Well, then we'll give complimentary sessions out there. But it's just about making the time. And again, was that the smartest? Could I do it better now with social media marketing help me? I don't know. I mean, you've seen how deplorable I am with that anyway. But
do you think that's a barrier to a lot of new, maybe gym owners and coaches, though, being willing to do that initial free work, whatever that free work looks like at the beginning, to build that exposure and that brand awareness? Because, from coaches that I talk to who are, say, earlier in the game or whatever, there seems to be like quite a hindrance in that when it comes to that. Like, no, I'm not going to, why would I do that for free or whatever? And it's like, well, you learned from someone and you learned about the people that you learned from probably because of free content. You didn't just find someone on the internet and say, I'm going to pay for their training course or whatever. So do you find that attitude has changed over time, or do you find that the ones who are willing to do that are always willing to do that and that's not changing?
This is a generalization. I find them lazy, unwilling to put the hard work in. Today, again, before I flew, consulted with a few guys that were prospective gym owners. They're unwilling to put the work in. They won't even take an online course. They won't lower themselves to take an online course. Never mind fly to a different country, live there, learn that, come back, then put that into practice. It's not like I had an immediate return from my investment and my time over at DeFranco's. So as a generalization, I don't see them willing to put the hard work in. Too many will look and they will say, me coming to this place, this is what I want. So therefore, I'm going to open up Compound S5 on the first week of training. And unfortunately, they can get credit now. It's so easy. They can basically get a warehouse, whatever size they want. They can get as much credit as they want, so they can have 100, 200, 300,000 pounds worth of kit. In my opinion, they don't have that because they don't own it. Yeah. They've just got a huge bill and outlay there. They're trying to start with my iteration of Spartan, which is like 6 premises in now.
Yeah.
They're trying to start way ahead of themselves. Again, generalization, there's others that recognize, actually, no, I need to learn my trade, practice my trade, and start from it. But again, too many I see now, and I hate sounding like this because it sounds like the broken record of the old man, at least to my ears anyway. They're looking for that instant impact. Well, we'll just chuck all of this kit in, people will come, and it'll be amazing from the start. And then, we discussed this at dinner last night, and then in about 6 months, I'll transition, I'll go full-time into an online coach, and I'll move to Dubai, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they're getting influenced by the small minorities that do try that and it works? Like, there are gyms in Dubai that pop up out of nowhere with that on day one, and obviously they gain traction. We don't see the failures right? But we do see the 1 in 1,000 that does really well. So
and I can understand the attraction. Again, rewind. If at the time I wanted to move into this and social media was such, that looks amazing. Perhaps I would have been influenced by that. But again, that's maybe where I was lucky.
Sure.
Those that influenced me, this was the route that they'd went down. So perhaps, I mean, I think it's wonderful now with social media, the things that are available. It's great to have resources available to you, to have all this information. Like everything that I did for my entire career's learning, we could go and get on a mobile phone now. How crazy is that? But there is that little missing link, that intangible thing about putting in that hard work in or earning the progression that you get. Because again, as much as we're talking about facility ownership here, the craft is still the coach. That is still your key commodity. What are the results that you can get for your clients?
Well, there's still a big difference between influence and education, and I think this gets lost. Where if we go back to your going to DeFranco was what, right around 2000, something like that?
2008.
2008. So almost 20 years ago, right? So 20 years ago, if I was, let's say 15 years ago, if I was to ask Joe, how many people have come in to be able to do the mentorship for you, on their dime, basically free, I'm pretty sure he would give me a number that's under 10. Very few, right? So how many people were absorbing his content back at that time? Hundreds of thousands. Out of the hundreds of thousands, 5, you being one of them, actually executed to be able to go and do that. Where we live in this false dichotomy of back then it was 40%. No, it wasn't. It was still 0.001%.
Yeah.
The same 0.001% that are doing it today. They'll see all the stuff online and say, man, I wish I could do that. I'm going to do that. But how many of them actually set up the gym in Dubai compared to how many of them don't? Right? You see, so it's a large number that actually don't, because the execution part is hard. All right. They can, credit might be easier to get. Maybe not so much now, but might have been easier to get. Great. Go ahead. I knew people back then that used friends and family, set up a gym and went bankrupt within 6 or 9 months, exactly the same way, because they don't realize that at some point, and you had to realize that this as well, at some point you're a business owner first and a trainer second, and that's a very hard pill to swallow. So how did you deal with that once you realized it? Because that's not what you got in it for.
That's how ignorant I was. Basically, once the first warehouse was open, I came back from DeFranco's, the warehouse was open, we opened it in January. By about the March, you realize, shit, I'm a business owner now. I'm a coach second. And like you rightly said, I got into this to be the best coach that I possibly could be. It's still my ambition now. I want to be the best coach, best educator that I can be. But now I'm this business owner. And that's not what I got into it for. So again, you've probably heard this. Then your books start to change. It's less strength training manuals. It's more business books. Alan Cosgrove, Results Fitness, they were putting out some great material back then and still are to this day. So you've got that transition. And then for myself, it was almost like it was the trio, because that's when my strongman career, for what it was worth, kicked off onto the international scene. So I was competing internationally. Wells trying to run the gym. Wells trying to become the best coach possible. I don't recommend that to other people, but for me, it worked fabulously well because they all seemed to support each other in some bizarre way, other than the fact that I got no sleep. My face is aged in dog years.
Well, I would say that in a positive side of that, the strongman training and competing does not allow you to think about your clients or your training. Or you see what I'm saying? Because when you're training, you have to be focused or you're going to fuck things up and hurt. So it's giving you this mental break from what's going on in the gym without you really knowing that it's giving you that mental break. I've been training for over 4 decades now, and keeping track of all my training metrics has always been a big part of that. It wasn't until later on that I realized that keeping track of your internal metrics are just as important, if not more important, the longer you're in this game. Most primary care physicians, if you go in for any type of issue, they'll look for what's off, but they're not necessarily looking for how to optimize where your labs are for where you want to go. That's where Merrick Health comes in. Merrick Health does advanced blood work with medical providers around the world and a health coach who helps build a plan around your goals. I worked with Merrick to build a custom lab panel for this show. They have guided optimizations that can help you set you up with a health coach to be able to work through what your goals are, from the prescriptions to supplements, just the whole deal. Don't have to do that. You can just do the lab panels. They have options. You can find this at merrickhealth.com/table talk for 10% off your first order. One of the best decisions that I ever made was to partner with Merrick. So I highly suggest you head over to merrickhealth.com/table talk and get started today.
That's a pretty insightful way to look at it. I actually hadn't considered that before, but I agree with you. Yes.
So take that away.
Yeah.
Then all that dead time is freaking out about how the fuck you're going to fix the heat, or how you're going to, deal with this client that's pissed off at this client for whatever reason. All the things that go wrong with running a business that you have to build calluses up over time to be able to know they're not big deals. But when you first start, everything's a big deal. But it's not a big deal when you're lifting a fucking stone.
I actually like that very much so. So yes, it served me well. The way I always look at it is the qualities, the discipline, the work ethic that trying to be the best strongman that I could be served me well. Because again, I'm a firm believer that you need to be able to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. It is essential for me that I lead by example in everything that I do. Even now, one of the reasons that I snapped this opportunity to come over here and do it, that I must lead by example to my current coaches that work with my current team, my current members, my current clients. So again, with a strongman, I'm practicing what I preach. These methods that I'm espousing to you can improve you. I'm a product of that system. I will take that as far as I possibly can. So that served it well. And within the local area, an element of people were aware of who I was, the level of competition I was doing. That didn't harm us. It didn't, hurt. People wanted to come to the gym and train with us to some degree. So it worked. But I wouldn't necessarily advise it to other people. It's just the route that I took.
Well, any media you're getting for that is media for...
Well, all positive exposure, isn't it? Of course.
Yes.
At that time, did you have to deal with any negative stigma around that, though? Because, we're talking about what the typical gym looks like at that time, right? And then you've got this warehouse gym and you've got this new way of doing things and this new setup. And I know your system reasonably well. It's how there are pillars of strength that are important and principles, and they can be applied to any demographic for almost any goal. But at that time, was it a struggle for you to almost not be known as like the strongman gym? Because then your demographic looks at you very differently, and all of a sudden your potential client pool probably shrinks right down. Whereas you're trying to make this, barbells or strength training, whatever it might be, is good for everyone. So did you have to battle that at all?
I'm battling it right now.
Okay.
I battle that to this day.
Yeah.
There is that stigma. Now, at the time when we opened, that was pushed, amplified by the gyms around us. They were incredibly insecure. Now, I'm very competitive in business and in life, but at the same time, I look at the industry that we're in, and I think it's essential that there are as many gyms as possible. Because especially the population where we come from, the obesity rates and the youth and things like that, I don't see a downside to multiple gyms. And I think the gyms should work together as opposed to it. There's plenty of people to go around. There's plenty of clients. But the ones around me were so insecure, so vindictive. The second day that we opened the gym that I managed on the high street, every window in the building got put out. The police said it was a random act of violence that's never happened before or since to that building ever. We know what it was. That was fine. We even got pictures in the local paper of all the windows put out, and we couldn't afford to put windows back in. It's fine. That's the level of what I'm facing. So when they were putting it out, you can't train there. It's just a strongman gym. It was so bizarre because we got labelled, well, they're all on steroids, sell gear. That's what it is. That's why they're achieving, despite the fact I competed in natural strongman. And I'm a firm proponent of that side of things, especially doing a lot of youth work. Going into schools, you're trying to espouse the benefits of health and fitness, not necessarily becoming a strongman. So that stigma was about there. I was very lucky from an early time period, possibly my history with mixed martial arts, that I trained a lot of fighters that then went on to go into the UFC. So we were just the MMA gym, so you couldn't come to Spartan unless you were an MMA fighter. We still get that now. So if you're not a strongman, if you're not an MMA fighter, you can't go to Spartan. what have we had in 20 years? Less than 30 of those. It's a tiny proportion. 90% of my business is the average Joes, the average Jays in between, average Janes in between. So of course we faced that stigma at the time. We still do. You face it the same way. You invite people to come down. You invite them to see the results. And it's still a bit of a challenge because getting people through our door, even now, I would say there's an element of a challenge. But my job, the way that I'll judge myself first, then my team, is once somebody comes through the door, once somebody comes into our ecosystem, how does their opinion change? You know, we run a 28-day trial process within the gym itself. At the end of those 28 days, obviously, sooner I would like them to realize, but at the end of those 28 days, they need to understand, why are we results-based strength training? Why is the gym called Spartan Performance in the first place? It's not because of the film 300 that opened not long after we were there. Again, I'll show my limited classical education. Ancient Spartans, men and women would train as equals. Physical training, doing squats, etc., was integral to that society, but the women would train with the men and alongside them doing that physical side of training. So that was my big thing, because the first gym that I worked in, they took over a ladies' gym. Ladies' gyms are still a thing in the UK. I don't know if it's a thing in the US. How depressing is that? Not just strength training in general doesn't discriminate. There isn't a rep scheme for ladies, you know. It doesn't need to be pink walls and, you know, thin handles, etc. So that's all of those barriers that I had to break down at the time. But again, back to your earlier question, how did we manage to survive the fact that we had very little money to begin with? You educate and you become undeniable. Let your results speak for themselves. And that's something that I don't mind sounding a little bit conceited about. I'm very proud of it, because if we didn't get those results, then we wouldn't have seen, you know, the end of year one, let alone whatever year it is now.
The way I countered, because I dealt with a lot of that same stuff in the earlier years of, if we're quoting a high school, the coach, you know, other competitors saying, yes, but, you know, they have all, you know, power lifters that are taking anabolics and all that. And anytime that would come back to me, I learned it took me too long to learn to not use the word but, you know, where I would get hit with that and say, but then go on and explain all this other thing. I just embraced it. Said yes, and 95% of all of our other customers are, you know, the drug-free athletes that don't even compete. I just embraced it.
Yes.
Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, we have that. They don't. But also, and we have 95% of the customer base, or 95% of the customer base that doesn't even compete, you know, and that way they can't use it anymore.
Yes.
Because, okay, sure. Yeah.
And that's something that I had to learn myself. Again, I'm speaking of the things that I did at the time that proved successful. But again, you mature over time. You become more experienced. You become more nuanced with how you deal with people. I became more comfortable within myself, within my role. You learn, at least for myself, I learned how to speak with people better, how to articulate my point better. And again, I think that just comes with experience. But thankfully for me, we were lucky enough to be getting results that sustained the business, which then enabled us to be able to get that benefit of, you know, being in the business a while, to have that sort of like level of hindsight.
Sure. So you've spoken about how, you know, when we're looking at growing this, well, which is a rare type of gym in the UK, like the results speak for themselves, and really the battle's won once they're through the door, right? So what does the average person experience when they come through the door, Len? Let's say in perfect world scenario, or like you're, either it's you personally or one of your coaches does the perfect job of this introductory period, whether it's 28 days or 1 hour, it doesn't matter. Like, what is the goal that I feel and sense and experience when I step foot in Spartan Performance in a perfect world?
This is what I aspire to. So this is what I certainly hope is happening right now back home without me. Because again, it took me too long to realize that I don't have a business. If I took myself out of it, everything stopped, because then you don't have a business, do you? And I'm so lucky to be able to be here enjoying, you know, the company of your good selves whilst my business is still operating. So what I would like to think happens once they're in through that door, the ideal scenario, they don't have to, we don't enforce it. They don't have to take a 28-day trial. We have options, but I encourage people. I'm very much a less is more type of person. Commit for the minimum period of time. You get to test drive our facility. The options can be very overwhelming. We have multiple packages. Do they need private PT? Do they need semi-private PT? What the fuck is semi-private PT? Is it small group? Why should they not be worried so much about the free classes we have? Yes, we have them, but they shouldn't be basing that on their decision. Why do we have sauna? Why do we have red light? Why do we have physiotherapy teams in? Why is there a classroom upstairs? Because even now, I'd like to think the way we do things at Spartan is still, to some degree, very different from what even more modern gyms are going to be like. So with that 28-day period, I want them at the end to understand why I feel the coaches in my place are its greatest asset. Because, again, what's this? This is just a toolbox with tools in. It's just a warehouse with lumps of metal in. Now, I happen to be very partial to the lumps of metal in my warehouse, and I could wax lyrical about why we have this piece of kit and that. The same with yourself. There's a history to every piece of equipment, but it's just lumps of metal. So I want them to know that the true commodity, why are they coming to Spartan, especially now, anyone could have a warehouse the size of Spartan. Anyone could have the equipment that we've got. They might not choose to do so, but they could. The experience of the coaches. Working with us, you'll always have a plan. You'll always know what to do. And you'll never get stuck, because if you've got a question, there's always a way to be able to get that answered. Ideally, we're going to be able to do that in-house. So again, whether that's the level of the coaches that are available, yes, they have access to me as best as I can. But again, if it was revolving solely around, I'll speak to Jack, Jack will do this. Again, it's not a business, is it? So they need to be able to get that level of support from the coaches. But again, we have the physiotherapy team that works there, so we can deal with the injuries. So it's I don't have a gym. In my opinion, I want a facility where there's education on site, where there's rehabilitation on site, where there's nutrition services, because it's one big ecosystem. I want them to feel like they're in good hands in terms of knowledge and expertise, but also about people who actually give a shit. And that is so important. Yes, we're a business. I'm very transparent about that. We charge what we charge, and I believe we undercharge. You know, you say we charge our worth. I feel like we undercharge, but we are on the more expensive side, especially with the local area. I'm fine with that, because I want people to, it'll be undeniable to them that the experience, there's no membership cards. We will know them by their first name. We will know things about them, you know, so they feel welcome. What is it? Cheers, the bar, where everybody knows your name. Yeah. It's the same type of thing. You want that community from the start, and we lead that from the front. So again, I want them to be able to experience that they're in good hands. There are professionals. That's something I'm a big stickler for. I want a professional facility, and I demand that I have a professional, and I demand for myself that I'm a professional. I'm not a gym instructor or anything like that. It gets passed around, you know, at least in my opinion. So I want them, sorry, am I blathering on too fast here?
Not at all.
You've struck a nerve.
I was just going to ask, in this context to you, what does professionalism look like? Because that's a term that in different environments means different things, right? So in the context of your facility, your ecosystem that you're trying to build, when you say, I want professionalism, like, what does that look like?
As a mental note, I will come back to finish the experience that I want, because there's more to that. But professional, how you look, how you conduct it. So again, on time is an example. On time to me is 15 minutes early, which is all well and good if we say that to a client. So you have a PT at 8 a.m., being there for 7:45. So once you know you warm up, you can get started with that. We run to schedule. However, that counts for nothing if the coach rolls in at, 8:05. We have to lead by example. And granted, we're not in a suit and tie. Our dress code is, a certain way. But again, I want it to be clean. So you need to be dressed professionally. You need to be able to speak what I would articulate yourself well. Show that you care. That's professionalism. I want coaches, I aspire to have team members who genuinely care about the client and want the best for them. And bear in mind, all these things I'm saying I want from them, I've not been those things in the past. I've fallen into the trap of pushing my goals on the client, getting them chasing my goals, pushing them, and then judging the quality. When I started, nobody could ruin a client like me. We had Kill Bill classes. And again, this is a battle I still have. I will fucking annihilate you. And there was a reputation built up. These are awesome classes to come to. We had an instruction studio. I would close the windows. I would put the heaters on until I realized how much utilities cost and I couldn't afford to do so. And I would hammer them. But you learn very quickly that any fucking idiot can get somebody tired. It takes a skilled coach, a professional coach, to get somebody better.
I built Elite FTS in 1998, 27 years ago, with the aim to help educate as many people as I could in strength and conditioning. And the way to do that was to keep all the content complementary. The way that we've been able to do that since day one is by providing the best products possible to help your training program. If you can put the item in a gym bag or load plates on it, we have it and it will work. Everything from SS yoke bars to American press bars, bands. We also have a strength equipment specialist staff that helps outfit home gyms, sport training centers, colleges that have over 3 decades of experience and also have spent a lot of time working as coaches so they understand the flow of the weight room and how things actually get done. If you're serious about your training and you want to up your game and support the podcast and all the content that we provide, head over to elitefts.com and use the code TABLETALK at checkout to receive 10% off your orders.
That's what I want. But it's the attitude. And I've learned that potentially the hard way because I've had professional coaches, but I've also had the experience of less professional coaches. How we conduct ourselves. I mean, it's probably a given with us. We don't have relationships with the clients. Mm-hmm. That's out of bounds. Not whatsoever. Your personal life is completely different to your professional. There's just a code of ethics. Now, again, if you came into my facility, I like it to be, it's not standoffish. Mm-hmm. We're very welcoming, we're very friendly. In many cases, it may look informal, but again, you have to have those standards. We can't still be doing tricep death. Now, don't get me wrong, mm-hmm. We did a lot of tricep death when I came back. I'd done that over in DeFranco's. Everybody got tricep death. What's your goal? Get better at golf? Tricep death. You know? Betty, what's that? You're 70 years old. We need to get over arthritis. Tricep death, you know? Mm-hmm. It was a hammer. It was the only tool that I had. I would like to think over time we have more tools in our toolbox and we are better technicians with how to use that. So again, that's where the professionalism comes into me. Do you keep upskilling yourself? My knife can never be too sharp. So that has to be true because then that attitude then has to trickle down to my coaches. We were lucky to have a lot of success in the first few years of business, first couple of years. It was almost like we could do no wrong. You get clients, they get their friends, then we got athletes come in. David Foley, the first ever professional athlete that hired me, pro footballer came to me, and then another pro athlete came. I had strong men and strong women competing all around the world at the highest level, not just myself, which was great, but they were better than me. I wouldn't admit it at the time, but they were better than me. I still won't admit it, but they were.
You just did.
Well, yeah, but I'm being, this is obviously going to be seen. Part of me inside says, I know I could have done more, but there was a lot of success, and I actually became very guilty of I believed my own hype for a period of time, and I didn't work as much. I didn't stay back as late. I didn't check out the latest online course that was available. You know, and not that I knew everything, I just became a little bit too complacent. And it was a rude awakening for me because, yes, the business was doing well financially, success was coming from the clients, but that is temporary. We're swimming against the current here. You have to keep pushing forwards. And when I relaxed, took my foot off the gas, I became less professional. The difference in the business in 3 months was alarming. And that was like a wake-up call for me then. And thankfully, again, I would say if I had one quality that I think's lasted, I've had the ability to learn from my mistakes, be able to hold my hand up and say, yeah, I fucked up there. I didn't hold myself to the same standards. And therefore, I can then obviously instill that in my team.
How did you know that was a mistake? What happened over the 3 months?
You start to see that the results aren't the same in the gym, that some people are starting to leave. We pride ourselves on our retention. At the moment, I may be misquoting, but our retention for members, I've still got members here that were there when we started. So I've got almost 20-year members, and I've got a lot of them as well. Easy up to 20 that have been there for like 20 years. And I've got well over 100 that have been with us 10 plus years. Our retention is very high. And that's way more important to me than attracting newer members because it's like the emperor's new clothes. You can attract people with a variety, have the latest, greatest thing on social media, attract people. We never do discounts, 2 for 1, discount for this. No, there's a set price. Yes, there's a trial period, but you come in, you pay what you get for. And I've read it that much, I've almost forgot my track there. So give me 1 second whilst I don't feel too embarrassed. How did I recognize it? So you see the results, you see the retention starts to drop off. The standards, the ethos, the culture in the gym. I think we have a tremendous community spirit, a tremendous culture, but then a few bad apples would come in there because I wasn't on the gym floor as much, spending a bit too much time on my own training, more time than I needed. And you know yourself, if you have one bad apple, well, that's going to spread. It's like a cancer. And you just notice it. The numbers are down, the satisfaction's there. And thankfully, I was still astute enough to be able to go, no, that's not good enough. And thankfully, I was able to basically draw the line in the sand, and that starts with me, because I could argue at the time the staff that I had, the team members with me, they weren't upholding their end of the bargain. But is that their fault? No, it's my fault. Everything starts and succeeds with me.
I've been lucky enough to do 2 workshops at your place. I know that was a couple of years ago now, but I can certainly espouse to the culture of Spartan performance. And when I say that, I mean you can feel it when you walk in. I can't tell you, but this is what I want to ask both of you. Like, you've mentioned the word culture, and I think culture is important in that you can't fake it. That you can feel it, you can sense it, but you can't like glitz it out of nowhere. So for both of you two, when we're talking about like the culture of a facility, what is involved in that? Because you can't like point to it and say, or you can't rate it like 8 out of 10, right? But there's like this intangible thing that we know is gym culture, but it's this multifaceted. So for both of you, what are the most important things that go into creating that culture?
I defer to Mr. Tate here. I'll let him go first.
Well, the first thing that I think of when I think of the culture and what that is most people think of this as being deep and not broad. Right. So if it's culture, let's say if it's training, right? If it's culture, then it's got to be kanji and it's got to be, fully all deep. And that's not really culture, right? Culture's got to be more broad, right? Because it has to be able to fit in people from different backgrounds, different training philosophies and all this. So what's the same across the entire culture? And then that's how it's kind of defined, because people define it too narrow and then make it impossible to achieve, right? So if it's just as simple as, live, learn, pass on, like always live what you say that you do, learn more and pass it on to other people. It's super broad. Like I can almost plug anything into all that, but you know what? It's not real quick. Right. So it's really easy to spot what it's not. And then other people will try to define your culture for you, as and say, well, this doesn't really meet what the culture is. And you're like, the fuck it doesn't. It just doesn't meet your version of you trying to take this deep when it's actually broad. They're educating and they're passing on. They're doing exactly what they should be doing. That fits that, so that's where I think people screw it up, is instead of making it just one line or one statement, they have this fucking 3-paragraph essay on what this culture is supposed to be, and it can be as simple as treat people like you'd like to be treated. Very easy. You know what it's not. When it's not, then it's not a good fit. And so it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. And then a lot of people will try to take what they think is their version of what that is and make everybody else try to do that. And that's never going to work either, because now you're taking people's specific personalities out, which can actually help grow it, especially when you're fucking old, right? Because the demographic coming up, there's always a demographic coming up that's going to annoy you the same way we annoyed the people that were above us. That's always the case. But guess what? They get older, right? So I've heard many times, well, they're not even in my demographic yet. If you survive another 5 years, they are. And they're going to remember the shit you said, right? And then they're going to move over to somebody else that didn't say that shit, right? And if the benefit of that younger culture is the people that they're gravitating towards, you've been around long enough, 99.9% of the time will not be around in 5 years. So they're going to be looking for somebody else, as they stay in age, and, people will matriculate out too, but they're going to be looking for that other person. You don't want to already be staged as the dick, because they will get there. So your turn.
Well, for mine, it wasn't like there was a plan, like I had a blueprint. We will do this to achieve, do X to achieve Y. Our culture, our community is simply a product of the environment that I created, and then obviously others have helped create. And it all, for me, it all comes down to having standards from day one. How, the rules, the ethics, the ethos around the gym in terms of behavior. We have a lot of rules at the gym, which I think is very important. But not only is it a case of do we have the rules, again, I'm walking the walk, I'm talking the talk. So I have to be a living, breathing example of how I treat people, how I speak to people, how I conduct myself in my own training. The standards I hold myself to as a coach, as a business owner, I will do my absolute best to provide the best level of facility, the best level of coaching skill set. So you give the members that courtesy that, I put my heart and soul into this. We are professional. So if we give that to them, that almost creates the standard that's required. I will never, I can be accused of many things. I'll never be accused, I would like to think, of not putting in the work, of not willing to put that work in. So if you've got a gym owner, a head coach that does that, and then by product, his team, I hate saying staff, his team members, his fellow coaches that also do that, that has to percolate down to the members, and it comes into how we treat them. Again, on a first name basis, we give a shit about them. And then not everyone's going to come into our gym, or not many people walk in the gym saying, I would like to squat, bench, and deadlift this, and I would like to compete in this competition, and it's going to be in 3 years' time. Very few people have that specific goal. A lot of people come in, and it's always the same. Want to be, more muscle, less fat, be a little bit fitter. It's very generalized because, again, we have to sit down, we'll define fitness, define strength, whatever it may be. So not many people come in with very specific goals. So we need to create that culture from ourselves. Well, we're very goal-orientated. I took this from DeFranco's. Which we probably took it from yourself in Westside, we had record boards on the wall when we first started. Some people did not like that. They articulated, put too much pressure on them, that we were, recognizing the best and we didn't care about anybody else. If you look at all of the athlete pictures on the wall in Spartan, well, that's not every athlete we've trained. That's only the ones that are the bare minimum of podiumed at a national level competition or above. They have to earn the right to get on the wall. You have to earn the right to get on the record board. And there's two types of client or member we get. Those that are put off by that and those that are inspired by that. Now, again, if they're put off by it, then I need to explain to them, you may never lift those things, but it's important to recognize the achievements of others. Now you can potentially work towards that. Maybe that's not your goal. There's so many goals that are available. Let us help you do that. So again, if you've got a team that are willing to sit down, converse with them, understand the person, help them identify a goal, because that's what we have. If I show somebody new around the gym, I have to say, it's a very specific atmosphere in here. If you have a look, a very specific culture. Everybody that you can see now, so they would look around the gym, they're all very task orientated. They're all following a program. Some might be working with a coach right now, or they're simply following a program that we manage. They are coming in to get a job done. It's not like all of our members simply come from the local catchment area, 5-10 miles. We've got clientele that will come from basically the region, so 30, 40 minutes, perhaps longer. So it's not like everybody knows everybody from outside of the gym. A lot of strangers there, but we break it down. And again, nobody's too good to help each other. And that's a big rule that we've had. I've sacked six members over the years. You will help people if they require a spot. Now, obviously, if you're not able to do that spot, well, at the very least, you would get somebody that could, if you're not sure where something. It's just how you conduct yourself. Yeah. Again, I'm trying to, keep this somewhat concise. If you do those things, if you live those values, if you practice them, then in essence, the members, they start to get on board with that. They're treated the same. We don't tidy the gym. They put the equipment away. And if you don't, you'll know about it. You treat that place with respect. But at the same time, the place will respect you because our equipment, if something breaks, it's fixed immediately. It's clean, it's safe. Again, if somebody gets stuck, it doesn't matter whether they're in a PT or not. They can always ask a coach and there's help available. We have online means that we can help people now as well. It's just about providing those things. And if you do that, then you attract and you keep a certain type of client. And obviously, if we have the retention that we do, so then when a new member comes in, it's kind of get with the program or not.
Sure.
So what is your coach retention? Because we can talk about culture all we want. Yeah. We can talk about culture and the fit to with the members and so forth that fall in there. But then there's culture within the coaches too. And I believe that you salary all your coaches, correct? Yes, correct. Right. So that can create, it can solve a lot of problems, but it can also create a lot of problems. Right. So there's a balance. The grass is always greener.
Probably the biggest challenge that I've encountered in business is staffing. and it's the one that I face to this day. So my retention currently is very good. So we have a look, Jack Beckwith, who you've met,
Yep.
coming up 10 years. So he came as an England schoolboy rugby international. So he just came to us as an athlete, wanting to get better for rugby. Decided on strength and conditioning as a university subject. Interned with us, built it up from there. So maybe 2 years ago, got his first mortgage. That meant a lot to me, just to be able to have somebody that's been with me that long, that's developed growth professionally. But because again, in the UK, I keep saying the UK because I'm not too sure how it works in the US. There are not many gyms that salary the coaches. And the income that they get, they can't get a mortgage. They can't get a car. The money isn't there. Now, I'm not saying that I would like to be able to compensate my coaches better. It's reflecting what the business brings in. But 10 years for Jack. Laura, she's been there a similar amount of time. So I would say that our retention with coaches is high. So we have had coaches that aren't with us anymore. Some for very good reasons, others for not. So I have been Alice, who you met.
Yeah.
So she was with us for a short period of time, but, her future lay in Canada with her family, and she's doing outstanding over there. So while she was a bitter loss to me because she had a great deal of potential, who am I to stand in her way? So I don't see that as a failure, whereas I have failed with other coaches because I've allowed unprofessionalism to seep in.
Well, there's still going to be a cap, with what they're going to be able to make because the business has to be able to afford.
Yes and no. So with mine, they are salaried. So full-time will be 36 hours. So that's full-time. They have a salary for that. But it's important for me to be able to insert ways that they can increase that earning potential. So again, if they can deliver on-site seminars, they can deliver one-to-one coaching outside of it. Jack Beckwith, he runs the nutrition side of things. Ultimately, if they have an aptitude for something, Laura took to the gymnastic style of training, that's fine. Then we will pay for that education. And then if she wants to be able to deliver extra. So I'm not saying it's unlimited earning potential because you can only salary so much. And I'm very transparent with my coaches. Maybe too transparent. This is what the business is.
Well, I think you have to be, though, because they're going to look at what you charge and what they make and see this difference and not get it if they don't understand business.
My coaches, they know the inner workings, to a reasonable extent. They know what the business costs. They know the running costs involved. They know the costs of new equipment. They know the cost of the education, which is all paid for by myself. I will invest in them, but there is a limit to how much you can salary. But then that's where that extra earning potential. And I like that. I'm not saying it's a perfect system because I have toyed. Sometimes it would have been, imagine how many self-employed PTs I could get here. What does Pure Gym in the UK, like a chain gym? It's like £800, £1,000 a month. They'll charge PTs. I'll just get 10 of those in. That's great. They can just do what they want. No, because that's not what Spartan Performance is. We are a private coaching facility that just so happens to have the size to be able to accommodate a membership base. So people can come in. And I like having that. I want that hustle mentality within my coaches. And the aim is, you can't guarantee to keep people forever, but it is, I'm not looking for a coach. I'm looking for a team member. And this is what we say when we look to recruit. Again, and we've been going through a recruitment process this year, and a few haven't worked out. They've basically fallen at the earliest hurdles. I'm not looking for people who are looking for a stepping stone. Now, I can't say sign this contract and we've got you for 10 years. A lot falls upon myself. I've got to satisfy them professionally, but give them the scope to be able to grow as well. So that's how we look at it. I have been unsuccessful with coaches in the past, but then I have to look at the reasons why. It would be easy for me to say, well, they were just bad eggs. They did things wrong. No. Why did they do things wrong? Because they started off pretty good. So it's something that I'm constantly learning myself to be a better business owner.
I mean, as a business and an individual who does invest a lot in their coaches, have you struggled with that, though, making that investment, knowing that the average coach is going to have a lifespan of X years? X for you is considerably greater than the average gym, right? But there's obviously a lifeline there for most, or a lifetime. Have you wrestled with that? Has it ever crossed your mind?
Always.
Like, maybe I shouldn't invest so much because I'm only going to get on average 2 or 3 years out? Or if anything, is that just this unwavering commitment where, like, no, the good ones will stay and there's going to be losses that come with it?
Well, there's two ways we look at it, first and foremost. How much money will I save by not investing that much in them? Or how much money is it going to cost me in the long run by having a coaching body of less skilled, less professional individuals? I'd much rather be in the camp of over-delivering. I want to over-deliver to my client experience. I want to over-deliver to my coaches. So I never want to go down the route, well, I'll just send one to this course and then they can come back and teach the team. once I start, in my opinion, if I start cutting corners there, that's like the foundations of the house.
I just want to take a moment to let you know about our crew. What our crew is, it allows the show to stay independent, and it's the reason why the podcast is still here now. The podcast is free to listen to, but it's not free to produce. It keeps going because of the sales through Elite FTS, our show sponsors, but more importantly, our crew members. The reason I love this is for many reasons, is it keeps the show independent. So I can pick who I want to speak to. I can pick what topics I want to speak to, and I don't have to be accountable to anybody. I just go off what the crew members want and what the audience wants, and I don't have to deal with all the other bullcrap that's associated with the podcast world. In return, what you get with the crew is ad-free episodes that are released a day ahead of time. You get access to our Discord community, which has AMAs, like 60 ebooks. We try to put a new ebook out every single month. Access to our coaching community with form checks, training Q&As. It also gives you invitations to our training retreats that are out here in the gym once or twice a year. 76% of all the people that joined in 2022 are still members now. Right now, you can either go month to month or get 2 months free with an annual plan. Just look for the link in the description, look at the QR code, or search elitefts.com crew and join today. It means a lot.
You know, well, we could use this mix for cement instead of that, and we could possibly do it for less. Eventually, you're only as strong as the foundations that you built on. And in my opinion, the foundations of my business is the coaches that we've got. So I don't want to fall into that trap. However, because I do that, it does make me more reticent when it comes to hiring new staff. But then again, a big mistake I made in the past was I hired way too fast and fired too slow. And I'm pretty sure I'm stealing that from Alan Cosgrove as well. In fact, if anything sounds remotely insightful, I've stolen it from somebody else.
True.
And again, I learned that. I would hire for qualifications over personality. That's another mistake that I made. So again, I would rather hire slow now and then get the right candidate. I'm not paralyzed by it, but it is, I'll use Alice as an example. She had a 9-month onboarding process. So it was quite extensive in terms of how she learns, how she mentors, gets her skill, until she's at a point where I would constitute she could deliver whatever I required. And I'm happy to take that time because I don't want to rush people. I want to make sure they develop at the right pace, because when I release them to my clients, again, right now, that standard better be being delivered back in my facility. Otherwise, we're, on very risky foundations there. But when you invest that much time in somebody and they don't stay the length of period of time, bear in mind, it was absolutely fine that Alice went and did what you did. It does play on your mind. You're thinking, was the investment worthwhile? And yes, my investment, Alice, was very worthwhile because of the work that she did when she was there. But more to the point, I'm looking at what she's doing now over in Canada. So, no, I don't think I'm going to change. But this is where Laura and my team will probably say, I need to be a little bit more receptive when new candidates come through. I'm probably more of a harsh critic when it comes to canvassing new prospective team members.
So what does that, I remember from being at your place, you were talking about like the onboarding or like the mentoring that takes place before they're an actual Spartan coach, which again is a pretty rare thing to have, especially to the extent that you do at your facility. So what does that kind of look like? Let's say you are very open-minded about a younger, newly qualified coach. They're kind of just like completely unformed, if you like. What does that kind of, whether it's 6 months or 9 months, like what are you looking to achieve with them in that time that lets you know this person is ready to be released onto the gym floor to carry our brand and what we represent?
Well, the ultimate end goal is they need to be able to deliver every service that we have available. Because again, if you've got a coach that can only do a few things, well, what happens when the other coaches are off? The business needs to run irrespective of which coaches are on site. So we have to look at the services that are available. So one, you've got just general gym, people coming in and using the gym under their own steam. They need that level of customer service ability behind the counter, that level of gym management authority. They need to learn their voice, their authority. They're in charge of that facility during that period of time. We have coaching in a variety of methods. So the classes which are free with all memberships, we would consider that small group, 8 to 10. That's as large of a group as what we will take outside of a seminar at Spartan. But those classes are a prefixed syllabus, and then people will sign in, and they need to be able to deliver each one of those classes to a high standard. So they need to acquire the skill set. Basically, I want them to have a level of mastery in the barbells, which is a big reason why I had yourself and Naomi in there. So everything that we have, whether it be barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, suspension straps, turf, body weight, they need a level of, I can't say mastery, but proficiency within that. So they need to get, and again, it's a very unregulated business in the UK. So what's the qualification to have? So for me, I pick and choose either certifications, which I feel like are taught well, or more to the point, I've had a lot more success bringing in experts and authorities like yourself, like Christian, Dan Green, everybody we brought in over the years. I need to get them to be able to deliver those classes first and foremost. To me, that's the lowest hanging fruit. But they need to be able to communicate to a large group of people, be able to progress and regress the movements. So they need to be able to learn that, but then they also need to be able to shadow it, then sort of like co-coach with another coach, and then be able to deliver those independent of another coach. That's your first port of call. Then we have semi-private coaching, and I kind of flip between the two. What's more challenging to deliver? Is it private, one-to-one coaching, or is it semi-private? Because our semi-private, how we deliver it, 3 different clients on 3 completely different programs. All have to be trained within an hour. They will come with their own independent program. That coach needs to be able to obviously cater to them and be able to adjust it. So they need to learn our systems. So yes, they need to be proficient in the movements, but then it's what is the Spartan system, the Spartan method for what are our coaching cues? I want them to have their own individual personality within that, but at the same time, I can't have you teaching a goblet squat one way, you teaching it completely the other, and me saying goblet squats are a waste of fucking time. What you really need is getting the leg press. So we need to have that one voice. Like my book, Spartan Strength, was so easy to come up with because in reality, what the publisher asked for was ostensibly my staff training manual. So at the time, I basically replicated my staff training manual. So if you look at the foundation sections, that's pretty much what it was. Obviously, I'd like to think a little bit more put into that. They need to get that. Can they teach small group? Can they teach semi-private? And again, can they solve the problems that they're going to encounter with that? Yes, we can get qualifications. They can say, I've got this certification, that's all well and good. But the art of coaching is being the ability to be able to communicate that knowledge to the clients that you've got there. And as you well know, how you may speak with me may very differ how you speak with somebody else. They need the time for that. And then the same comes with the one-to-one coaching. They need to learn how to be able to liaise with the physiotherapy team. So whilst it's a separate company, ostensibly we're all chasing the same goal. When they work with a client, then we'll get obviously the information from them with the client's permission. So then we can factor in there, because it's important we stay in our lane as well. You pick up an element of injury prevention or injury rehabilitation, but I'm more than happy to defer to an expert. They need to be able to understand that, how to use the sauna, the benefits of the red light. They need to learn that system. Once they're to that point, then I need to be able to have them on. And during that period, they don't wait 9 months, then do it. During it, it's a case of shadowing another coach doing it, then co-coaching it, then coaching it themselves whilst they're being observed, alongside which they will have 2 sort of levels of staff training. So we'll have the team meeting once per week. So that's where the group will get together. That's typically where you will focus on the positives. I think it's important to focus on the positives in a group setting. If there's individual constructive criticism, then you would save that for a private meeting. That's how I want to develop them. At the same time, look, when you came, so I was very open with you when you and Naomi, even when Christian was up there coaching, I will make every resource available for my trainee coaches, whether it's the library in my classroom, the education. I'll bring in world-renowned authorities. They will have access to them for free. When we go for food, I want them to immerse themselves in that experience, but I'm paying attention to how they conduct themselves.
So as we back this out, with communication being the core of all this, how do you go through the interviewing process before they're even hired?
I'll tell you what it is currently, and it is probably lacking. So something that I feel like is never quite up to scratch, but initially they will show an expression of interest. We are not actively hiring, but we are definitely hiring if the right candidate presents themselves. But if we were to put it out there, we will review the candidates. Once over, you would get a CV sent through. Then I went through the phase, will give me a video, because I want to be able to see how they speak. Ultimately, they will reach out to some degree. The first thing that I do is I'll get them to come in for a chat, and they will meet the team. And that's so important. One, I'm testing their awareness of, for me, why Spartan? Why do you want to work at Spartan? That is very important to me. So are they aware of our history? Are they aware of our pedigree? Are they aware of the type of training we do? Or are they just looking for any old job? I'm looking at how they interact with my team during that period of time. It's not about, well, what qualification have you got or anything else like that. It's just generally an informal chat to get to know the person, the personality. Because again, in the past, my mistake, I hired for qualifications, not personality. Anybody can learn, in all fairness, it's not rocket science what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Most people can have their capacity to become very competent coaches from a skill set. Do they have that? I can't train personality. I can train skills. I can't train personality. So we need to be able to see that. That's first and foremost. That's the first part of it. Then it's really important to me, and I didn't always used to do this, I need to take the feedback from the team. Because it's not just that they're becoming an employee of mine or Spartan. They need to be working with that team member. When I'm again lucky enough to be able to, travel and come and see people like yourselves, they need to be working well as a team. How do they work together? And in the past, distant past, I didn't necessarily take that on board. It's very important because we want a team member. How do they mix? So that's the first port of call. Let's say that they pass that. Then the next thing would be like another interview where they would come in, and that's where I'd be asking specific questions. And I'm very transparent with it. I give them as much rope as possible. In my opinion, if I give them rope during that informal meeting, they can use that rope to climb to the next level, or they can use that rope to hang themselves and sabotage themselves. So by that second meeting, this isn't anything to do with like an ego. They better have read my book. They better, it's a very easy read. It's a very quick read. They need to understand the systems, the methodology to some degree. Do they show that aptitude, that enthusiasm? That then tends to be where I go from there. Now, something I am considering, and it's something, because obviously I consult with a lot of gyms, I'm lucky enough to be acquainted with a lot of coaches in different gyms. They actually just have the prospective employee take a 28-day trial out. So they would simply get the trial for free and enjoy the gym. And then the coaching team is watching how they interact with clients. How do they speak with them? Do they just come in? Do they put headphones on and say fucking nothing for the 28 days? They watch it that way. For me, I choose not to go that route, but only once we've made a decision for somebody, then it's a case of this is the period of time. It's like a temporary thing. It's a trial period. And then I'm very, very transparent. This is what I expect from you. However, this is what I'm given from you, because it's a two-way street. I can't just be saying to you, you will be this, you will be that, it needs to be this, and I do nothing. This is what we will provide in return. And there needs to be basically checkpoints, much like we use with the most recent coach. Obviously, we're meeting all the way through, but every 3 months, they need to be hitting those checkpoints. So that's kind of how we go about it. Sure. It's a drawn out, I wouldn't say an arduous process, but it is a drawn out process. But to me, again, maybe I've taken it a little bit too literally. It's important to hire slowly to get that right person, because what I can't afford is to just chuck somebody in. You bring in a bad egg of some description, because that can be, like say we've done that now. I've cut corners in this interview process. If they're now not coaching to our standard, not upholding the values I've espoused on this podcast, that's costing the business when we go back. That might stop somebody from signing onto their trial.
Mm-hmm. In many ways, when this is drawn out over 6 or 9 months, it essentially becomes like an internship, right? In many ways, which is great. So, and you yourself, in some ways, are a product of an internship that kind of inspired you to go in a certain direction. But that seems to be quite a rare thing now. Like, do you think internships are kind of dying because people aren't willing to commit to the longer term process of that education? Or do you think, or it could be a bit of both, but do you think it also falls on to gym owners and business owners like yourself who just aren't offering it now and people don't even know it exists?
Bit of both, the latter. So as a generalization, I think the majority aren't willing to put that level of effort in. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I would say again, the majority of gym owners aren't willing to put that level of effort in, because for me, it's very time intensive. I put a lot of my own time into developing that prospective coach. So my return on investment in month 1, 2, and 3 is very, very poor. But I play the long game and everything. Training, strength training is a game for life. It's the same with developing a coach. So I think it's a mixture of both. And I'm not going to pretend to sit here and say I have the answer. Our way is the optimal way. I'm always looking at how others are providing. Perhaps we could refine there's got to be a better way. Mm-hmm. That was probably the mistake I made back in 2012. I assumed my way was the way and we'd cracked the code. That was it. We've completed this, which is nonsense. But no, I would say it's a mixture of both.
Sure.
What I've seen with that over, going all the way back to when you were with Joe. So when you went with Joe, it was normalized that somebody would go work under somebody else and they weren't going to be compensated for that. That's just the way it was. Then over this last 20 years, this gap, huge gap, started to unfold to where those people that were coming in for that wanted to get paid for that internship. Right. And so then there's less people doing it because they're not going to do this shit for free because they know they're working for you, even though you're teaching them. And at that same time, the people that were doing those internships begin looking at this saying, oh, wait a minute, you know, I'm giving you thousands of dollars worth of education during this internship, to which, by the way, they started selling themselves.
Yes.
So now they have this internship, mentorship that they're using as a product, which is 2 weeks of people coming to your facility to learn your system, right? You're charging thousands of dollars for that, to where you're giving that to this intern, you know, essentially for free. But now you have this intern that's like, no, I want that for free, but I also want to get paid, you know, $40 an hour or whatever it is. So that gap just keeps getting pulled further apart to where those facility owners are like, no, I don't need these people anymore because I'm not going to pay somebody, you know, unless they're, you know, so that gap, I don't know how we fix that, right? Because there still are, it's rare. There still are those that will go work for somebody, you know, mentor under them for a small, but it's rare. It's more rare now than it was back then. It was still super rare back then, but there is the expectation that if you wanted to have interns come in, that those interns should be paid. But the counter to that, once again, comes back to the employer. That's like, I'm not going to give them thousands of dollars worth of education that their university did not do, by the way.
Yes.
You know, when they're paying the university, you know, to be able to learn the worthless shit that they're not going to use, and they expect me to pay them to teach, you know, so it's this weird landscape, especially in the strength and conditioning and sport performance side, because it trickles down through all of it.
Well, you're quite right. And I'm obviously heavily influenced by my background. It was a no-brainer. It was the done thing. Of course, I'll go to Joe DeFranco. It's an honor to be able to go there and learn from him. It is just the most obvious thing. So, of course, I'm going to carry that to some degree. Now, in the past, our team members, they intern for free for a period of time. Now it's a shorter period of time and we get them paid, but obviously it's a rise in pay scale. And that's why, to me, the interview process is so important. Because again, I don't want to find myself in a position where we've dedicated 3 months to somebody, teaching them things. Now, not necessarily they're going to run away with those skills, open up next door and put us out of business. That's not the point. But that's a wasted investment of time. I want a return from that. But we compensate to some degree now.
But would this not open the door for an amazing opportunity to somebody that, let's say, they save up, you know, 3 months of expensive revenue, right? And then they contact you and say that they want to come in, you know, to be able to basically intern.
Yeah.
And now they're going to come in basically for free because they've already saved up 3 months to be able to live and to be able to learn from you. I would think that pretty much kicks the door open way faster than all these other people.
Of course.
Because what are you going to say no to somebody that saved up 3 months to be able to come in to be able to learn your system? As long as you know that they're not only doing it so they can come in, learn your system, leave and go start their own place, which that would be the risk you'd be looking at in that situation.
Why it's a dialogue. That's why it's important for me to be very transparent from the start. It's like laying your cards on the table. This is my expectation from this. But again, even if we're not hiring, should the right candidate present themselves? Bet your ass I'm hiring. So yeah, it's not
like a no-brainer in a situation like that.
Now, admittedly, they are maybe not quite the needle in the haystack, but they are less. More so now, again, the current trend is people want to fast track everything.
Well, this is the way to fast track it. That's kind of where I'm going with this is everybody wants that hack and that fast track and so forth. And I'm telling them right now, I don't care what profession it is. If you present this opportunity to anyone, you know, the odds are they're probably not going to say no, right? Because there's too many positives that lay into that whole thing. And then you can't bitch about the fact that nobody is going to hire you, you know, and X, Y, and Z that kind of follows through with that. Because everybody that I've presented this to says exactly the same thing. My only concern is they're doing this to be able to start their own thing. Yeah. That's the only risk, right?
I mean, we can't prevent that.
You can't
There's no guarantees. From my end, dialogue's important.
But either way, they're still in the door.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you made the mistake before of hiring coaches purely on education.
Yes.
Which I'm sure any gym owner or someone who's hired has probably made the same, right? So if we're taking that out of it, and you've kind of talked about this a little bit already, what skills are you looking for in those coaches then when we remove that education side? Let's just say that's taken care of. But then also for like young would-be coaches out there right now, how do they train those? Because I think that doesn't get talked about a lot. Like gyms will say, well, yes, we want you to be educated, but we also want you to be this, 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 and this. Like in your experience, the ones who are good at ticking all those other boxes, whatever they might be, how have they generally gone about doing that? I know that's a horrible question, bro.
I look for good communicators.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the initial conversation, can they maintain eye contact?
Mm-hmm.
Can they speak? Can they communicate well? How do they communicate? Now, of course, you can work on those skills. You can work on your interpersonal skills. Over time, we become more comfortable speaking to larger crowds. Of course, you can train them to a degree, but you've got to have that personality to some degree where you are comfortable speaking to people. Your attitude, and that's the one you can't train. You can develop those communication skills, but you need to have at least a base level of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's the attitude. Are they coachable themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Are they willing to learn? So it doesn't matter how educated or not they may be, we will be able to provide that course for education. Are you going to embrace that?
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment because we do read the comments, and one of them that keeps popping up more frequently than not is, I can't believe this video doesn't get more views. Take a minute to subscribe, leave a comment, and share. It really does help.
That's a key commodity that I'm going to look for. When you're not on site on the facility, are you like myself? Are you, looking at forums, message boards? Are you following nowadays probably better Instagram accounts? Are you listening to the right podcasts? Or is it just a case of if you're not within the facility, then your learning stopped? That attitude, enthusiasm. That's the things that we're looking for. Now, of course, we can train them to a degree, but some things you can't. They've either got that good attitude, they are receptive. I don't expect them to necessarily have my work ethic, but are they? I mean, again, it's you get into this business, the hours are going to be unsocial. They are going to be long. If you're getting in this to work 9 till 5 or Monday to Friday, you're in the wrong business. My business is open 6 days per week, all hours, and you will be all over the place. The needs of the client, and therefore the needs of the business dictate that. So you've got that. So again, you need that work ethic, that resilience, that ability to willing to commit to that. That's the things that I'm looking for.
You mentioned as well, I think it was in your summary of things you wanted to talk about, that it was very important to you that coaches, including yourself and those that you hire, respect lineage. Use that term, I believe. What does that mean to you? Because that's quite an interesting statement to make, that's something of great import to you. So I'm just curious what you mean by that.
Well, I suppose it depends on what I take that to be. Mm-hmm. For me, I look to those that came before me, those that I've respected, those that I've looked to learn from. For me, it's very important to understand the history of this game. elitefts, Westside Barbell, Bruce Kubik, Joe DeFranco, those that were delivering results in varying forms before I came along. That's like that lineage, so to speak. Then, obviously, we've came along. We have developed some degree of lineage ourselves. That's why it's important for me to understand the history of Spartan to some level. How did we start? It's not difficult to get that information. It's very easy to find, and I'll provide them with it anyway. I think it's important to respect the history. Now, for me, there wasn't a gym before that, so I'm looking at the history of the people that I'm learning from. That's a quality. It's something that was important to me, and it's something that I expect from those that are working with us, because they're becoming part of something. What happened to get it to what it is now when they're becoming part of it? And if they understand the things that it's went through to get to that point, again, you join my team. There's 20 years combined experience between the two full-time coaches that we have. What have they been through to get us there? Because again, we're a private facility in a landscape in the UK where commercial gyms are rife, whether it's Pure Gym or whatever they're called. Did Pure Gym open something like its 800th site?
Yeah.
Recently in the United Kingdom. Yeah. Now, that's a good thing, but also not necessarily a great thing for the independent gym. So again, what makes us different? They need to understand that, because the better an understanding and appreciation of that, they can then help me move forward to where I want us to be in the future. So
So for you, is it like an integral part of them being able to respect the system that they're part of?
I would like them to respect it, and I'd like them to be aware of it. Integral is a little strong, perhaps. Maybe I hold it to a higher value than they necessarily need to, but I don't want them to be ignorant of it.
Sure.
I think it goes a little deeper than that, because if we're looking at, if we go back before online, you got people that are taking things from books and then applying it to whatever demographic they're working with, right? And then that would be shared if they knew people. But it wasn't being shared as much as it was after we go online, right? So then internet comes around and now all this stuff is being shared online. So what works in this region, this gym, that's what you're seeing on T-Nation, Elite FTS, and all those different places at those times. And all those different philosophies, for lack of a better word, have holes, right? Because they've only been used with one demographic, right? And then it gets put up there as this is the way that we do it. Then it gets used broadly across a lot of different demographics, which obviously no one program is going to fit all demographics. There's going to be a lot of holes. So when you go from, that's 2 layers down. So you got the books, right? And then you have, and I'm sure there's other layers before that. So you got the books, then you have the internet. And then now you have this layer here where you come in. You're filling a lot of those holes, right? Because you tried it, it didn't fucking work. The tricep death, shit like that, things like that. This doesn't work. It's fun. Yeah, but it doesn't have the application. It's not getting the real world results. The important thing of knowing the lineage is you do not want to go back and start over and repeat the same holes that were made from the start, right? So as it continues decade through decade through decade, more of those holes are going to be closed. They're still there now, but let's say it's half as many holes as what it was before. You don't want to repeat history, right? Even though we do, right? But in this case, we can avoid it by knowing what happened before.
Yes. Very good way of putting it.
So we've spoken about like the philosophy and the culture of Spartan. And now we're going to assume not everyone who's listening has read your book, right? So what are the cornerstones of the Spartan training philosophy that you have all your coaches doing whatever iteration is appropriate to that client? Like, what are the commonalities through it that we would recognize if we were to spend, say, a week in your gym?
Again, as a generalization, look at how we start coaching the coaches that work with us. It's the ability to help our client. I look at relative body weight strength. I look at having a good command of barbells, good command basically of the tools that we have. So whether that's the barbell, the dumbbell, the kettlebell, body weight to some degree. We're not going to elite level gymnastics, but relative body weight strength. Machines, which is something that we didn't have a great deal of when we first started the facility, purely because I couldn't afford them. But we have more machines now. So the system is a case of, I want coaches, we need to have a good command of all of those tools. Then it's a programming system, a program philosophy system, you call it, where we can attend to the wide demographic that we've got coming in there. And it's not about putting square pegs in round holes. No, I mean, it's not 2008 anymore. Not everyone has to back squat and conventionally deadlift, but it's important for us to have the command to be able to then choose the right tool. And I'm a sucker for the old system. You're going to have them perform the basic human movements, a squat variation, a push variation. That's what we want for all of our clients, the ability to take them through that. Now, of course, it depends on the client's goal, what they're coming in with, the injury history, how that goes about. The ideal blank canvas is getting like a youth in, and we can start them with basic commands of just movement, body weight, pushing sleds, pulling prowlers, not for any one specific goal, just building their general physical preparedness. That's still something we see to this day. A lot of our clients that come in are not actually physically fit enough to actually train on what we would consider to be, there's no such thing as an optimal program, but you get my drift on that. That's our philosophy. Having a command of those modalities, but then knowing how to program it and periodize that program across their journey. And especially for people who are coming in with not necessarily a 3-month, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year plan, because very few have that. We need to know those tools, we need to know those systems, but it's very important to be able to, call an audible? This is a terrible fucking, I've seen that in movies for American football. You need to be able to ad lib, but still stay. Those are our core values, like results-based strength training. But again, what form does strength training come in? Is it a 1 rep max for squat, bench, deadlift? Does it become world's strongest man? Or is it actually just have the ability to be able to perform a push-up out of a power rack or something along those lines?
And how has that changed over time? Have you found that as Spartan has grown, like your philosophy has kind of broadened because you've had to, because your demographic has changed? So what are the principles that maybe have stayed from like, day one, that first gym up to 6.0 or 5.0? 6.0 that you're on now. So what has stayed, but what other things have you questioned along the way and maybe gotten rid of as part of that training philosophy?
There's a lot within that one. A big key change now is there are a lot more machines within the gym. And our focus is heavily, how can, John Russell on not so long back, fabulous podcast, by the way. How can we put miles on the muscle, but not necessarily miles on the joint? We want pain-free. So yes, we want to put them through those movement patterns, but is it a case of using the Swiss bar, the neutral grip? Not everyone has to back squat or front squat or even barbell squat. Is it the belt squat? Or is it a leverage squat or a pendulum or something along those lines? So we've certainly grown to be able to incorporate those. Where back in the day, if you trained out of my facility, by one way or another, I would have you using the barbells, squatting, bench, and deadlift. And we don't have a trap bar to begin with, but obviously, again, I would prefer the trap bar over the straight bar. So there's a lot more from that. And you evolve that because we become better problem solvers. We become more educated, more experienced. I would like to think, a much better coach now because I can choose better tools for the job. You're not trying to shoehorn anybody into one thing. And again, a big part of it is, especially looking at the demographic we've got, it's that longevity side of things. The people who want to be elite in the strength sports, the elite athletes that come to us, they're a very small proportion of our client base. So how you train them is basically how they require to be trained. And what does Stan Efferding say? If you want to be healthy, don't compete. So again, if you're going to train those, that's what's required for them. It's not necessarily healthy per se. So it's almost easier to work with them because you know what needs to be done with them. Whereas the general population, which is what 90% of my clientele, 90% of the time, we want that longevity. So we've become a lot more receptive and have a much better command of knowing when to not use the barbell, when to stay with the dumbbell. I think it's something we got right in the early days. You have to earn the right. So again, if I've got a youth, I'd much rather focus on getting them to be able to perform push-ups before I worry about getting them onto a dumbbell bench press. And I want to have a level of proficiency there before we'd even contemplate the need for a barbell bench press or a horizontal press variation. But we've definitely evolved for the better. In fact, we had a client maybe 2-3 weeks back. He was with us at Spartan 1.0, so like 2007, 8, 9, in that period of time. And he only just came back and he was like, this place is really different, but it's also the same. So we still have those elements, but again, they'll say it, oh, you've got more machines. Yes, but what's the reason? There's a very specific reason why we have the machines that we do. And we're looking to increase the equipment range at the gym, and and the way we look at it, I'm transparent with the members. I ask what they want. They come back with a variety of things. I'll explain, why are we not getting that? Why are we not getting the treadmill that you want? Why are we going with this piece of kit? Because again, the equipment, it needs to improve my program, and that's the way that I look at it. Will it help us solve a problem more efficiently, more effectively for a client? So that's how we kind of evolve.
Sure.
That was my attempt at a succinct answer.
No. And how do you walk the tightrope then between, I have a facility here that has a culture and a training philosophy here, and then I have coaches here that I know are highly skilled and have their own way of doing things. So how do you battle the want to stick to the same hymn sheet, as it were, versus giving them enough freedom to express themselves as a coach and also grow and perhaps make some mistakes along the way? Because that must be difficult at times.
I've tried to be, and I still try to be a better listener. Because again, in the early days, one of my greatest assets was it was my way or the highway. This is it. This is our goal. This is our vision. This is our methodology. And we're going fucking all in for it. And of course, it can bring a certain level of success, but you become too insular, too narrow-minded. So I have tried, and I am a better listener, but I do need to work on that because, again, I want team members, not robots. I want them to be able to bring their own interpretation to that. Yes, we have our core values, Like, I feel it's important for our members to be able to squat, to push, to hinge, to perform single leg work, whether they're an athlete or not. But again, which single leg variation do we go with? How do we progress that? Yes, we have that template that we could write down, but it's very important for me, the coaches, to have their own spin on it. Now, if I disagree, I think, well, you're doing that and I wouldn't do that. Well, that's where the team meetings come into play.
Okay.
Explain it, basically convince me, because I'm certainly not too good to learn. If there's a better way, even just from a very strictly crude business sense, the clients that are hurt less and get better results stay longer and pay longer. So why would I not listen to that? But it isn't a quality that I've always possessed well.
Sure.
Well, it's what I found is being open-minded is the answer. Basically, the answer there is, in most cases, the better way that, say, Tom has a better way, right? And then he'll explain that way. And then at first I'm going to think he's out of his fucking mind, right? But then I find it's actually the same end result as my way, just explained differently, right? That's that open. You got to listen to what is actually being said, and then what is that end result of that? And then in almost every case with him, all of them actually, that I can't think of one that's not. It's like, fuck, that's the same thing that I'm saying this way, which is crude and barbaric, where his is more astute, I guess, for lack of a better word, but the end result's the same, right? Where I can sit there and say, oh, that's all bullshit because of what's there. But if they're not open-minded and actually listen, then somewhere in between this is going to be the best way for the gym or the client or whatever it's going to be.
You're right.
Right? Because my way is just like super barbaric and cool. Let's just get to the answer within fucking 2 minutes and I don't give a fuck. He can take 2 hours to explain the same thing, but it may stick.
Yes.
Right? Now, what's more important, me hacking the thing, which works for a day, or it being explained in such a way that it never needs to be repeated again? Because I'm going to guarantee I'm going to be hacking the same shit 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Right? To where that's critical. And it's a skill that not many coaches have because they're so, I don't want to, well, we're already so far. They're so fucking dogmatic in their own views that they don't understand that what's being said is exactly the same thing. Yeah. How many times have you found that to be true?
Yes.
Like you'll listen, and sometimes it's marketing, right? They're just going to spin something for marketing purposes to make them stand out more than somebody else. And that's even worse if it's in a facility. Like, this is unnecessary. You know, you don't need to be able to do that.
The thing I like what you said is it's the result that matters. That's what we're there for. We are there for that client result. We want the best possible result for them. So again, if the coaches have a better way of communicating it, better way of articulating the point, then I would be a fool not to take that on board. I might be slightly stubborn. If you had them here right now, I'm sure they could list the ways that I'm stubborn. But again, it really comes down to what's our true values, what matters the most. And it's the client result at the end. We can say the experience, but ultimately it's the result that matters. And if we can get to not necessarily a more efficient one, as in they've got a result for the day, it's the result that lasts that's going to help us stand out from our crowd. Because again, we need to stay relevant within business. We want people to still, stay with us, but also come to us as well.
So I'm curious now then, you've developed not only a training philosophy, should we say, but a culture that goes along with it. And I can tell by how you talk about it that that's very meaningful to you. And that's very good. It's great to see that you take pride in that. So then how does one try to carry those things into the online world, which you are doing now, right? You have Spartan Online.
Correct.
So I'm sure that was probably a mental battle for you. Like, is this going to water down what we do? You know, are we going to lose a lot of these things I've fought so hard to create? So how did you navigate that? You probably had to convince yourself to do it, but then how did you come across a methodology that you were happy with that could deliver it the way you wanted to?
Well, it's something that I held off for a long period of time. I'm a big believer that you have to earn your right to do certain things. So case in point, if we backtrack, and apologize, this is a little long-winded. When I first started managing a gym, I wasn't doing programming and I wasn't coaching clients for fees because I didn't have that skill set. I was doing inductions. I started there, free inductions, and I was just on the gym floor helping people. I've read this, we'll try that. So it was completely free. I had to earn the right, get my knowledge, my skill set before I ever had a chargeable PT session or a chargeable program. There was no way that I was comfortable putting my book out. And I used it turned out it was 10 years when the book opportunity came around, because to me, I wanted it to represent I'm showing you what's worked for me, working with thousands of people over a decade. Therefore, I felt comfortable speaking on the subject. Not as in it's the definitive answer. This is just what I found effective. Same with when seminars came up. I had the opportunity to do seminars before I took them up because, again, it was important that authenticity matters to me. So we come with that one there. So again, with the online side of things, I held off for a long period of time. It was actually the COVID period that kind of pushed me into it. I offered online coaching before then, but I didn't advertise it. Basically, we would be lucky enough to meet, when we had seminars, we had people coming in from around Europe, from around the country. You would meet them. They would reach out, do you offer online coaching? And I kind of started it because there was a demand there for it. But I was very much an in-person coach. To me, the in-person experience is really important. So I wouldn't say I got into it reluctantly, but I did a very small scale. Then we fast forward, and I'd imagine the circumstances were very similar over here. You basically close down immediately overnight. You don't know when you're going to reopen. We need to pivot. Our first thing was to be able to support the current client base. We lost one member in COVID. The rest stayed paying members throughout the entire COVID period, even when the gym was closed. They paid full fees all the way through. They had the option not to, but they chose to because we delivered an online variation of the gym. That was like a perfect, much like working in the prison service, was the perfect learning phase to become the basic tenets of a coach. I ironed out the communication problems. My ambition with online coaching is to make it as impersonal as possible through that medium. Severely handicapped by the fact I'm a fucking dinosaur when it comes to technology in the first place. So thanks to COVID, I figured out what Zoom was and so on and so forth. So we had that period where we had to solve the problems for the clients, provide that service through an online medium, whether it was like Zoom video calls, providing programs, tutorials. We basically learned doing more things by video, providing it for them. Again, that was not a chargeable extra, it was simply the service. So when you come out, that gave me the confidence to then want to move into more publicly facing. Yes, we offer online coaching. And again, I was also in a position where I could remove myself from the business. Because again, prior to that point, even if for all the will in the world, if I wanted to be an online coach, I didn't have the time. I'm still coaching 10, 12 hours per day in the business, then working on the business after that. Where does online coaching come? And I'm probably a slow mover. If I don't feel like I can do something well, then I'm not keen to rush into something. It's important to me that I can offer a value. So then when it came to then obviously moving into the online side of things, how can I, as it comes back to your original question, is how can I do that? And I wouldn't say I've cracked the code, but I'm trying to provide that. So whether it's the way that we deliver the program, because initially it used to be a Word document, then it's an Excel sheet. Well, now, do you use Train Heroic, True Coach? Who do you use?
I know of Train Heroic and those, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll use a trade. I'm assuming you might use a training app to either deliver the program or communicate in some form or other. The videos that we provide, so again, they're all bespoke, but it's not, you go on YouTube, you might see somebody performing a squat. The video is us teaching the squat, how we want the squat performed, relevant to that particular program that you're following. Is it perfect? Does it beat in person? No, nothing beats in person, which is where my biggest gripe with people becoming online coaches is. If you can't solve problems successfully in person for a long period of time, I don't think you have any right to be doing it online because you just can't solve those problems. We had this conversation at dinner last night. Doesn't matter how many videos they shoot. You get that person in front of you, you can just see more things. But ultimately, what's the availability? And then I look to back that up. And I'm not saying this is the way that I do it. When you're working in person with clients, you get to converse with them more than just saying, this is the set, this is the reps, this is the rest period. You converse with them. There's nuance within that. Like a program, it's just words on paper. Whereas when you're working with a person in person, so a client in person, there's that nuance. How do I do that? So for me, I want to give as much education to the client as possible. So yes, they get the program. Yes, they get the video guide. What's their access to me? What is the access? It's important that they understand the what's and the whys and the hows of the program. Now, some just aren't interested. They just want to just tell me what I do and I'll do it. Great. Fine. It's easier work that way. But in my experience, again, I'm not saying it's right for everyone, the better I can, like again, in person, I believe a good coach's job is to become obsolete. Like our ambition in person is to be obsolete. We should be able to teach a client so well, empower them that they should be able to do a lot of these things, even if they weren't working with us.
We live in some crazy times right now where there's not a day that I don't go on the internet and I see some BS crap about this research study or this research study. This isn't new. I've been in this industry for 4 decades. One thing that's helped me is 8 years ago, the mass research review started and became a godsend. The mass research team are professional researchers that are also meatheads. So they've done this great job of being able to take all these topics and put them into this research review that I get every month. I'm excited to partner with them. I spoke with Eric Helms about this on the podcast. It's simple, it's easy. They're offering a 20% discount to all podcast listeners. The code is elitefts20. When you join, you get the research review, which is going to be sent to you every single month. That has 7 to 9 articles in there. The archive, which is 1,500 articles, thousands of videos. Just head over to massresearchreview.com and use the code elitefts20. The link will be in the description.
It's the same with online as well. So we mix it up, whether it's that access to looms. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. But that's what I'm aspiring to do. I'm not too sure how you do it with your clients.
I think that's great. And I like that mentality though, because I think that's quite rare. And it requires a lot of confidence, I think, to go in with the mentality of like, I want to create a client that doesn't need me. Because it sounds like the world's worst business strategy, doesn't it? But the reality is that you either purposefully handicap them so that they need you forever, but then invariably comes to the point where it's like, well, I'm not getting better anymore. So like we've probably had our time. Or you accept the fact that by building them as an athlete or a person or whatever, at some point they're like, cool, I think I got this. But like, is there a bigger compliment as a coach than that? I don't think so.
Just make a positive difference for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, who's more likely to refer you? The person who hit a plateau and went somewhere else and maybe they made progress, or the person who was with you for 3 years and was like, I haven't needed a coach for a decade because I learned so much being coached by Jack that I've been self-sufficient, and maybe there'll come a time I hit another ceiling. Who am I going to go back to?
Exactly right. And I'm not saying you can future-proof it, but that's also the importance of continuing your education.
Yeah.
Because again, I can teach you everything I know 5 years ago, but I damn sure better know more now than I did 5 years ago. There's more than I can bring to the table. But if you set yourself up the other way and, like you said, handicap the client to become I think that's just a very disingenuous way to go about things, and that's not what I got into this to be a coach for.
Sure. Because like, you know, you mentioned that individual coming back to your newest facility who was at 1.0. He's not getting coached by the same Jack Lovett.
I certainly hope not.
You know what I mean? Like, you should. That Jack Lovett should be looking at what Jack Lovett was doing 10, 15 years ago and go, I'm not sure I'd do about 50% of that now, or maybe more, you know? And I just don't think that gets talked about enough, where if you are, from what my opinion is worth, if you're doing a very good job as a coach, you're building the person to be more sustainable, because they're learning the philosophy and how coaching works, so that they understand, oh, well, Jack has put these methods or this exercise in. I know why he's done that now.
Yeah, I want them. I'm very transparent. It's no fucking secret program. There's no magic recipe or Jack sets and reps or anything like that. I am very transparent. Now, it's up to them how much they want to know, but I will basically go overkill to begin with. This is your goal. This is the reason we're going about it in this particular phase. This is what we're looking to achieve from it. By all means, ask questions, and I constantly encourage that. And I was looking, so I think we've got 79, 80, one-on-one online. So they're in like a group. Not all of those are engaging with me. They have the capacity to put questions in every Monday. Then I'll basically shoot a live Q&A video back, and I'll address all of the questions they've got on. Because to me, I need to cover the key bases. It's, if they've got a goal, well, are they training for the goal? Are they applying themselves? Are they applying the program optimally to achieve that goal? Because you can write the program, but how are they applying it? Are they eating for the goals, the nutrition? Are they sleeping for their goals? Are they recovering optimally for the goals? Are they moving for the goals? It's all of those things. It's not just sets and reps. So it's important that I provide that education, because I need all of those ducks in a row. And I don't think it's true that you can get optimal in every single category, but you want to at least remove the limiting factors that are there. Because it doesn't matter how good your program is, or it doesn't matter how good your feedback is on a exercise technique video, if the diet is fucking atrocious, or they're not getting the sleep, or they're not recovering. In my opinion, you can only progress as well as you can recover. So it's very important that I provide that nuance, that education. Because again, look back to what was probably something that we were successful with in the early days. We got better results. And that's the key thing. That's going to be the commodity. I mean, come on, everyone's an online coach now. How do I stand out? How do we stand out in the online market? I've got fucking no idea. I'm terrible at it. But at the very least, ultimately, you will be judged by your results with the client. So that's my approach at the moment.
Do you think that's one of the areas where online becomes just naturally harder though? Because you and I are doing an in-person session. I have 3 minutes to rest during my back squat. Well, we're not going to sit in stone cold silence.
No.
You're going to know I had an argument with my boss, or I've not been sleeping well because we've got a new puppy, or, you know, whatever, right? And you're going to know, even without directly having that conversation, you know that I'm eating well, sleeping well, or whatever else might be going. Whereas online, you know, you might just get an update like, here are my lifting videos from today.
Yeah.
You see the exercise, but you don't know the context. Do you think that's one of the bigger barriers to trying to bridge the quality gap there?
Of course. Coaching in person is an art form. The ability to have the knowledge, communicate it in the right way to different clients, because again, how you speak to different clients is different ways. They have to be a different character. If I've got 8 clients a day, I have to be 8 different people. Or speak in 8 different ways. So doing that in person is a challenge in itself. How do you do that online? So what I'm learning to do, certainly not mastered it, but again, I pay attention to how quickly they do a check-in. You know, at school, you know, when the dog ate the homework, well, it was pretty invariably, it was only the homework that wasn't done that dogs got ate. Whereas you've got a client and they've done everything they said, they can't wait to get that update in. And then you'll have a look and their check-in is paragraphs long, as opposed to coming in last minute. Yeah, everything's going great, can't wait for next week. To me, that's a red flag. I need to learn how to read. Now, some are just simply, you know, more reserved with their words, shall we say. So I need to learn to read the signs, learn to engage. Okay, that, you know, they've ticked the boxes. I look on True Coach, there's a green tick next to the exercise. They've put the weight, but there was no video uploaded. So that's you know, that's your first litmus test. Yeah, I did it, it's going great. Show me. It's the same with a nutrition client when they check in. We get a lot of people who don't want to provide check-in pictures. Now, I understand the comfort. Nobody hates a picture taken more than me. I feel for Alex. Alex Kickout's been on here a few times. Fuck me, I must give him trauma every time he looks at my check-in picture because it looks like I'm going to the gallows. You've never seen a more unhappy looking face. You just crop my face out, please. But again, if you're not willing to provide, again, those that check in without a picture, it tells me everything I need to know why they didn't. You know, if I've done well in a week and I haven't had Cheesecake Factory last night and pancakes for breakfast this morning, I want to check in with Alex. I want to show him the progress I've got. So you need to learn to read those signs. I'm far better at that in person than online, but it's something that you learn. But again, that's my approach to online coaching.
Yeah, of course.
In my opinion, that will help future-proof it to an extent. Again, in a very, very saturated market where everybody and their friend is an online coach.
Sure.
I think there are 2 different things. When you were talking about the in-person, and once you get them to the level that they don't need you, you know, because of the training, my argument to that would be, I believe they need you more, right? Because when they're in person and once that's all those boxes are checked, you are then providing certainty in their life, which life is hard, right? They know what's going to happen. You're able to read their nonverbals. You know how their day is. You give them something that they're excited that they like to do, right? As Tom said, they're going to tell you about their dog, or they're going to tell you about your problems and all this. You may be the only person they have. You may be as close to them as their family, right? Maybe not their spouse, but like right underneath there. That's an important person in somebody's life. That nuance that you're talking about is not just nuance. It's huge.
That's a really good point. Like such a good point. Is it the Starbucks experience? Become the 3rd place. So you want like the gym to be the 3rd place. They've got home, they've got work, and then they want your gym to be the 3rd place for you. And that's what we want to become for them. So again, we want to get them proficient enough in the gym where they don't need us, so they could come in and they could work their way around it. But again, we bring that accountability. We bring that certainty. And you're quite right. Maybe that hour or 45 minutes they've got is their only 45 minutes that they have to themselves that day.
Yes, and if all the other boxes are checked, you can lean more into that.
And then that's great. This is the only time I have for myself this day. I'm in good hands. Now, granted, yes, I know what to do, but again, you've got that coach It's really good.
Why else would you have people for 10 years?
Exactly right. They haven't learned how to. They haven't learned how to lift.
Would you say that's the difference, though, between needing your coach and wanting your coach? Like, I need Jack because I can't drag my ass to the gym if I don't have an appointment with him. I don't want to piss him off. Or I don't know how to squat without Jack barking orders at me. Versus, I want to go to my session with Jack because actually my session with Jack is the highlight of my day.
Yes.
You know, maybe that's a transition point there where your client, if you do your job well, we hope goes from need to want.
That's what we should aspire to.
Yeah.
I agree. Again, it's the old Cosgrove thing. Mm-hmm. The first priority of a coach is to be the best part of their client's day every day. And that comes back to the professionalism we want. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what's going on in our life. It's game face time when they're coaching the client because we need to give them that certainty during the session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
it's even more important now because the world's more digitized than it's ever been. Right. So you have more clients now that only work remote. So where else are they getting personal interaction?
That interaction, yes. Mm-hmm. I agree.
Nowhere. Right. So it is more important. Now, that's why I say it's two different things than online, because online, you're never going to be able to replicate that, but they're two different things. I think we should get past this idea that they are not two different things. Mm-hmm. Like people like to conflate it and make it seem like it's the same thing.
No,
it's not. Right. Somebody that's working with somebody online probably shouldn't need them after a couple of years. You know, that's okay because there's always going to be more. You have fucking 8 billion people in the world, you know, 1 million of them. I don't know how many fucking people train. I looked it up one time. It was a lot.
There's enough.
You know, so there's a bigger pool to be able to have that attrition rate.
Yes.
You know, which you probably do want to have if you're an online coach. You're going to get bored out of your fucking mind, you know, because it's just kind of the same thing with that.
True. But then I'll not counter to that, but for me, it's still important to aspire to want to improve. Again, maybe that reflects more on myself. If I get comfortable, if I get complacent, then the quality of my service drops. I want to always be looking to deliver better. Again, we must have talked about a lot at lunch, dinner last night. I pay attention to, like, all coaches should have coaches. I've got many coaches myself in various facets, and I pay very close attention how they deliver their online service to me. Mm-hmm. You know, whether that's how they word their emails or not, as the case may be, as we discussed last night. I'm always trying to pick up better ways because, again, from a business perspective, I can only satisfy so many people in person. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my gym, even the place the size of this, with everything you've got in it, you can only coach so many people. So there's a limit to how high you can scale that, where I wouldn't say online is infinite, but it is easily more scalable. We're looking at where we're going to go to Spartan 7.0. Mm-hmm. We had the opportunity to knock next door, double the size of it. Members think it's a great idea. Yeah, fucking brilliant. Again, it comes back to what you said to Joe all those years ago. Every one of those extra square feet comes at a premium, comes at a cost. You know, there's the return on that investment. We can't, whereas if you've got the right systems set up and play for online coaching, if we had 100 members sign up at my gym today, fabulous, but we're in fucking trouble. Like how?
No, I get that. I mean, the point that I'm making is if you're looking at this as a P&L, they're two different revenue streams.
Yes.
I'm not going to market my strength equipment the same way I'm going to market my t-shirts.
Correct, yes.
You know, it's two different line items, right? So the marketing's different, the promotion, the scaling, all that's going to be different. Where I don't think people are looking at it that way. You know, they just look at it as training, one line item. And it's like, no, it's a different SKU. It's a different product category that goes in there. So that product category, yes, you need it to scale, obviously.
Yes.
You know, because you can scale that unlimitedly.
Yes.
You know, where you can't scale the only way you can scale the other one is keep increasing prices.
Yeah.
And more location. I mean, there are ways, but there's
limits and there's problems that come. There's problems that come with that. And again, I'm a sucker. I love in person. You had in-person seminar just this last weekend at the Arnold. It's so important. And I think we got out of the habit of that as an industry. Even prior to COVID, I saw less of them. And then obviously they kind of died a death. They were the most enjoyable aspects of...
What's your best way to test new ideas too? Yeah. Right? Because your feedback's going to be way faster than what you could get the feedback if you're working with somebody online.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the laboratory as well. So it does feed.
Yeah. And for me, it gives me the most satisfaction.
I was going to say that too. I think that doesn't get talked about. Like, even if you go back to the online versus in person, you can't tell me that doing an in-person session with someone and fixing a problem in person is less rewarding than doing it online. They're both fantastic and great, but the magnitude is certainly higher when you can see their response and you're in touch with them, like literally in person, seeing their body language. And then for me, I think the seminars and the workshops go that step again, because it's like, oh, we get 2 whole days together.
Yeah.
Like we can talk about things and go into subjects that there is no bandwidth to do. Which is also why like podcasts like this are fantastic. Like we don't have to clickbait anything. We got hours. So you can talk about your training philosophy, how you built your business to what the nth degree of detail, because we don't have to fit it into this tiny arbitrary window that, cuts down the quality. So I think, I hope that the in-person stuff makes a big bounce back.
And we're just talking about the experience for the client. What about the experience for us as coaches?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Again, the network and the people that you meet, like that is just so invaluable that you can't get anywhere else. Again, I would say that I've benefited massively from the fact that I've been to so many seminars and met so many different people in person. Relationship, well, how did we meet?
Yeah, precisely.
We're in the same country, not too far apart. We may never have crossed paths.
Yeah. Sure. Although, in fairness, how far apart we're in the UK is like galaxies compared to being that far in the US.
It's true, but then people traveling in the US is not an issue.
No, absolutely not. So I'm curious now. Then we've talked about Spartan's kind of journey.
Let me hijack a point you just made, because this is important. When you're online and in person, right? To kind of piggyback on what Tom said, online is brutal. Right? Online has more negative feedback than positive feedback. All right. A post with no comment to a lot of people is a negative feedback. A post that doesn't get enough likes is a negative feedback. If there's 5 comments and one's bad, it's a negative feedback. So the online coach is inundated with either internal or external negative feedback. And a thank you that comes in an email doesn't mean a lot, right? A thank you that comes from a person that you can see and feel means everything, right? So if all somebody does, and I know this from personal experience, is online, you can make a big difference, but you never know that you really are, because you're not ever fucking told, right? And all you see is the negative shit, the negative emails and all the other stuff, to the point where I don't even look, you just post because it's not real. Right. So when you get the opportunity, if you are an online coach, even to work with somebody for one session or to do one clinic for a handful of your clients, do it.
Yes.
That way you can actually feel the difference that you're actually making. Because if you don't, you'll go years and not think that you're making any difference whatsoever, because that feedback doesn't come. And maybe it does, but you don't see it because you're inundated with all the things that you think that you want to be, right? You're aspiring to be this, or you're aspiring to be that, which any of us are ever going to achieve. But at the same time, that we forget how many people are aspiring to be where you are. Like, you're frustrated because you're aspiring to be at this level, right? And then it's frustrating, especially if you're just online, because you're getting none of this positive feedback and all the other stuff. But if you just pause for a second and thought, how many people are looking at you saying, man, I wish I had what you have. You get what I'm saying? And then that trickles all the way down. So for those online coaches that don't, just do one clinic for a handful of your clients somewhere. You'll see and feel what you're actually doing, because I don't think they do.
Also, it'll be a good quality control test, because I know of many an online coach that if we were to bring them in and say, okay, let's teach it to a group, they couldn't communicate, they couldn't teach it.
Sure.
I want to take a second to throw a quick shout out to my friends over at Mastonomics. They have some of the greatest t-shirts. Their memes are incredible. Their YouTube gym tours are great. These drink spotter things, I got about 7 of them out here. Snap them on power racks, put smelling salts in it, drinks. I think they hold up to 10 pounds, or they have different sizes of these. These are great. They made coasters out of stall mats, which is amazing. But what I really wanted to let you know is to go check out gymradar.com. They launched a website that's going to help people find home gyms that they can train at, and to be able to put your own home gym on there and not only be able to find where it is, but see what they actually have. And it's also great for product reviews because people are putting the products that they have in this Gym Radar. Just go check it out. It's great. So it's www.gymradar.com. And also check out Massonomics. Check out their website. Check out their Instagram. The memes are great. And check out their YouTube.
And you make a very good point there about the online landscape. And I maybe this is reflecting my own experiences here, but it seems to be a commonality where we're good at in-person interactions. Say like you have 5 sessions lined up with your clients, 4 of them go incredibly well. They're super receptive, very grateful. You have one client who's just having a bit of a bad day, whatever, you know, like it doesn't go very well. You don't click. You would walk home and go, that was a successful day. I mean, John was out in a bit of a state today. Who knows, right? You mentioned the 4 good comments and 1 bad comment. Someone looks at, and it's not necessarily strictly comments. We're talking about the online landscape as a whole, but that 1 bad email is not. We look at the 4 good emails or comments, and we kind of brush them aside. They're like, they're online comments, like that doesn't mean much, right? But then that one, we don't do the same thing with the bad one. We don't dwindle that down. We look at that like, oh wow, that's a day ruiner. And I just find that really interesting that we seem to be better at making that balance in person than we do online. So I do wonder about that for those who have never had the in-person experience and have that maybe confidence that builds, where they get that reciprocal feedback like, dude, thanks for that. I'm going to turn up to my next one because it's worth the effort. You know, they don't have that concrete base of like, no, I'm pretty good at what I do and I make a positive impact. They go straight into the online world where we have that weird perspective that's skewed. Like that must be very challenging to weather that. I
can imagine. And again, we're very lucky we have that background of being in-person coaches, in-person problem solvers. I think it develops skills that you otherwise couldn't acquire.
Sure. So where does this journey of Spartan and 6.0 and the culture and everything, where does Spartan Raw come into that? How does that seed get planted in Jack's mind, where it's like, we're doing all of this stuff, we're building an entity, an ecosystem, if you referred to. Where does Spartan Raw come from then? What's that adding to what you're creating?
It was a natural progression. From day one, we've focused on internal competition. So again, it was important to get client buy-in, little inter-gym competitions, etc. way back in the day. Obviously, strongman was something that we became well known for, so we hosted a lot of strongman competitions. So from the early days, we were always hosting in-house competitions of some degree, some description. Ended up hosting and running a lot of high-level national competitions for strongman. And then powerlifting just seemed like the next evolution. And again, I'll look at where does the interest lie in the gym. We had a lot of people pursuing strongman, so of course we invested in the equipment, we invested in the coaching, but then we had more people gravitating towards powerlifting. More people gravitating towards powerlifting, wanting to push that. So again, we developed the equipment range. That's why we brought in the monolift from yourselves. We didn't always have a monolift, but again, we had that need because we had the client base that were competing to that level. So again, once you've got enough clients following that particular discipline, well, then it's a no-brainer to want to do it. And that's the main impetus. At the same time, I'm good friends with Andy Bolton. I was coaching him for a little while, not in regards to powerlifting. And we decided to put a meet on. And he said, well, you've got a great facility. You've got the elite monolift. It'd be great having it. It'd be brilliant to put a competition on. So sure, we'll dip our hand in. We had others help run it. And it wasn't the best experience either for the athlete or for us to run it. And I was just basically sitting there speaking with Andy, Dave Beattie as well, powerlifting royalty, in my opinion, from the UK. And it was what would make great competition. And that excites me because, again, I've been lucky enough to be a competitor. And then you think, well, that gives you a certain amount of perspective. You want to put on something where it's a wonderful experience for the competitors, but you also want it to be a great spectator experience because that goes hand in hand. It's a very lonely competition when you're a strongman in a pissing wet car park in Northern Britain. There's 5 people watching there. My mother won't even come, and it goes on for hours. It's just not, great. So again, from my end, how can we bring something in-house to make sure that the competitor experience is high, but also get spectators in, because I think that's where the strength sports suffer, especially strongman as well. You need to make it spectator friendly. So ultimately, the opportunity came. I spoke with others. You're familiar with Alex Clark. You've been on his podcast as well. He was the one that pushed me more towards the raw side of things. Basically, he saw the trajectory, especially in the UK, and there was a gap in terms of raw powerlifting, which again attracted me because it's more accessible to the average gym member. And much back to my earlier point, strength training doesn't discriminate. It's open for everyone. And it was just a no-brainer to put it in there if we had the capacity to do so. Thankfully, we've got the equipment. So, yeah, that's where it came from.
When you started Spartan Raw, was it the only Raw competition that was allowing sleeves? I believe that's correct.
Correct, yes. That would be non-tested.
Yeah, so what I mean is that's different.
Raw with sleeves.
That's different over here.
Yes, but in the UK it was the only, it still is the only Raw with sleeves.
Yeah, so like over here, Raw, like using sleeves and Raw is normal over here, whereas in the UK, Raw means naked, need nothing.
Yes.
There wasn't a place for people who wanted to wear sleeves.
Yes.
You had to compete with the wraps category, which is like, well, now I'm willfully accepting a disadvantage. Why would I wear sleeves? So that was a huge...
Correct. So it was a nice niche to move into.
For sure.
There was a demand from the competitors that communicated that to us, but at the same time, my end from a gym owner, this year we've got 17 members for the first time doing their first ever powerlifting meet at Spartan Raw.
That's cool.
It's just so fantastic.
Yeah.
Whether they aspire to a career in powerlifting is irrelevant, but there's so much that can be, like for them, when I say to them, it's an awesome competition to get involved with, because for the next 3 months, you will improve your ability to lift a barbell. You become a better technician with a barbell. Irrespective of your goals long term, you are going to be better served if you can perform those movements better. Get them in there. It's fantastic. I'm biased, of course, but I think it's a great competition to be a part of. And it's where powerlifting separates from strongman. In strongman, you've got to lift on the objects that the promoter gives you, and they'll dictate whether it's this for reps or that for rep or whatever. You turn up and you just have to be able to deal with it. Whereas with powerlifting, it's wonderful because you dictate the load. Everything's under your control, which again is something that it's more welcoming to beginners.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas I'm going to run a strongman competition and it's going to be a 350 tire for 5 flips. Can't do it, tough shit.
Yeah, sure. How did you go about making it more spectator friendly? Because that's a hard challenge, right? And you said that's something that's been. So what did you implement over?
I was lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to go and support some of our coaches and clients competing in an IPF competition in Northern England. So it was in a social club, like a men's working club. I don't know what the equivalent is over here. And it was deadly silent. The warm-up area wasn't much larger than this table, even though it's a large table. No cheering was allowed. No sort of emotion was allowed to be expressed. And it went on for 8-9 hours. It was an endurance test beyond belief to get through as a spectator. Now, that rubs off to the competitors because they were thoroughly unmotivated in the warm-up area. It was basically a thankless, arduous process. So yes, they did it, but I was like, it has to be better than this. So I look back at strongman wasn't too dissimilar. I've done competitions that take 2 days, 3 days. A comp that takes 8 hours when you could get it done in 2-3. My preference as a competitor is we want it to be done quicker because you warmed up, you're ready to go again, so to speak. But also it's important for the spectators because again, only the most even if it's IPF powerlifting competition, the working men's club was full at the first set of squats, not as full for the bench, and then it was just the most dear supporters that were there for the final deadlift, even though typically the deadlift's the most exciting part. So can we bring that a shorter period of time? And in part for us, it is limiting the amount of competitors that we put into it. So it's not from a financial perspective, well, if we get 100 lifters, we bring up, that's not the point. We'll cap it at 3 flights. Therefore, we know that we can get it run in a reasonable period of time where it's great for the competitor, but also equally so for the spectator. Better for each. So that's the approach that we take.
Sure. And how have the athletes responded to that?
Most have been very receptive to it. Some of the super heavyweight gentlemen, less receptive.
Because there's shorter breaks.
Well, of course, they don't have 2 days to recover between, they need longer recovery periods. But again, I have seen that, the evolution of the powerlifter. You see them, like Dan Green was a bit more of an anomaly, you know what I mean, lean and jacked, and now you get a lot more so now that their philosophy isn't outweigh the object they're going to lift. Same with strongman to a degree as well. So the majority of the athletes were receptive to that, and I'll admit that's the one that I'm trying to cater towards. You know, because if from a gym, we want more people to compete in powerlifting. We want more people to get involved with that. If they go and it takes 8, 9, 10 hours, they're less likely to want to go through that process again.
Yeah.
At least that's
I can speak from it. I mean, I won competition. I did my first deadlift, my first squat at like 8:30 in the morning and my last deadlift to like 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that makes you not want to do a competition more than that. Like, that's awful. So how do you balance that? You know, you've been in strongman, you've competed, you know what it's like to be a competitor, and you've got a lot of your own Spartan clients now in this competition. So of course there's this big motivator to make Spartan Raw like the absolute best place to compete, right? So how do you balance that with the business side of it? Because not hemorrhaging money on a competition that you want to make very enjoyable, fun to be a spectator at, I'm sure is very difficult.
Oh, for sure. It's not a profitable endeavor at all if we are strictly looking at that from, well, we close the gym from a Friday afternoon all day of a Saturday, 2 very lucrative days for us from a coaching perspective and coaching fees. But we need to do that to run the competition. To me, it's not a sacrifice, but it's a worthy thing to do.
Yeah.
Again, it's a great feature of the calendar to get their members to aspire to working towards. I'm a fan of the strength sports, and I want to encourage participation in them. So if we just judged it from a strictly commercial standpoint, then it wouldn't happen. But then you wouldn't make a lot of the decisions that you do. Sure. Would I have done the 3 sessions that I did when I started because I'm not getting an immediate return? For me, it's far greater. Don't get me wrong. You speak to me 2 days before the competition, halfway through, we're never doing it again. It's a fucking nightmare. But then, and it sounds very cliched, very cheesy, you see the smiles on the faces of those, especially my members, that have been through it, they've hit PBs, you know, they went 9 for 9. That's the holy grail, especially if it's the first time. Let's go 9 for 9. And they go 9 for 9 in front of a crowd, the family's there, they love it. From a very callous business perspective, well, I've probably got that member for at least another year. Yeah. You know, you could judge it from that, but it makes that, is it a sacrifice? It's not, because I think a big part of what we do, we have to give back in that regard. Yeah. It can't always just be judged on the return that you get, at least for me, for that.
Sure.
What's the best way for people to find you?
That would be Instagram, so they could reach out to me, which is Jack Lovett. DM me on that one there. We have the gym, which is Spartan Performance. So either of those channels, and you'll come direct to myself.
I will have all the links in the description. And any final thoughts?
I would like to express my gratitude for being here. Looking back to my history, to the likes of the people who I aspire to be, you're a massive factor of that. And I look at what's gotten me here to this day. I'm sure Tom played a significant part in that, but I would encourage all those to listen, especially whether they're newer coaches or longer term coaches. Every seminar, every communication, every email, everything I've done to converse with other people has paid off tenfold. Don't be so insular. Don't be so isolated. We're in a niche business where we should all be in it for the same good reasons. Reach out, converse, because then great things can happen. Like this trip that's been available to myself, this opportunity, I would encourage everybody to do so.
Thank you.
Oh, one final thing. And of course, if you would like online coaching, then drop me a message.
Very good.
Well said.
Very good. Thank you for coming out, and we're done.
Pleasure. Thank you.